June 2nd, 2026. We're going to get started. Going to call this meeting to order at 8:36 a.m. Moving on to section 2, opening exercises, moment of silence, pledge allegiance, and preamble of the Declaration of Independence. Mrs. Ewing, would you like to lead us this morning?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Thank you, Mrs. Ewing. Moving on to 3.1, Master Capital Plan Update. Turn it over to Mrs. Rodriguez and Grace Designs. Welcome.
Yes, good morning, President Toby, Clerk Prophet, members of the board, and the community. We would like to share all the work that has been done over the last year, culminating the gathering community information. We did a full facilities assessment, or Grace did, and we've been working with Grace to develop the final plans and the information. You've seen pieces of this information at prior board meetings when we've looked at the closure and consolidation plans. So what you'll see in this report today is the culmination of everything, and there will be some recommendations or suggestions from Grace. So none of these things that you see in this report today are decisions that you need to make today. It's just information giving you the status of where our facilities are and what the future may look like. And we are shaping the future of Peoria schools through this plan. So having said that, I'm going to turn that over to the Grace team.
Thank you. Good morning, President Toby, members of the governing board. Nice to be back and to provide this sort of a broad stroke bookending update of the capital planning process. My name is Saravanan Bala. I'm a partner and a K-12 practice leader with Grace Design Studios. I have with me my amazing team, Ms. Williams and Mr. Buchholz, and alongside others who've been instrumental in giving this shape. So to what Ms. Rodriguez mentioned, we're going to present a high-level summary. So typically how a capital plan works is you collect the data, and based on the data, you begin to see some patterns. And we brought to you high-level patterns earlier this year that you were able to act on as phase 1. So just carrying that terminology forward, calling these phases, a 10-year capital plan, typically shakes out anywhere from 3 to 5 phases, roughly about 2 to 3 years a pop. And so we began to organize potential action items in action buckets, action types that you could consider. And a lot of the capital planning actions tend to be carried forward in a group setting of some sort, a committee sort, because the information has to be digested and processed on a periodic basis. And so we're going to essentially present a whole bunch of ideas today that you may want to think as thought starters that allows you the ability in a group setting to carry forward. And we've organized them in various buckets. So just sort of starting through a quick summary of the information we collected. A lot of this information is baseline information that you've seen before. The biggest point of emphasis would be the third bullet point, which is the facility conditions index, which is essentially the tangible assets that we benchmarked. We walked every one of your facilities, all 374 buildings, plus or minus, and multiple campuses. We looked at everything visually, the components. When we say components, that's flooring, ceilings, doors, walls, roofs, sidewalks, everything that makes a building. And so we organized each of those components and gave it a facility conditions index, and that aggregated to a building, and then those buildings aggregated to a site, and then the sites aggregate to the district. So that's the 23% approaching when it says very poor threshold. And just as a refresher, anything under 5% is considered good. And in the public school space, that's sometimes a pipe dream because not everything is possible within that 5%. There are states where there's possible, but their funding formulas are, like I said, dreamy. So anyway, so our goal would be to try to give you broad information that you can act on, logical and factual information that you can act on. That's sort of the goal. So understanding the facility conditions index, the threshold, and there are certain campuses that are higher than that, just to understand that. And this is not new news, you know this. And then you did create some action out of this initial information data set, and to acknowledge that this is not all a dire story. There is growth in the district that needs to be factored in. So just acknowledging that as a high-level summary. What we've done is taken all of the information that we've gathered and distilled that into 3 broad priorities. And the biggest one, as you know, is the significant under-enrollment that you're facing as a district. Roughly about 23% of the district seats are unused. This is obviously somewhat of a lagging information set because this is what it was back in 25. You've obviously improved on that a little bit. And the story needs to continue further. And that's a big part of the priorities is how do you right size? A significant percentage of that under enrollment is in Area 2. And you may remember a graph, and I have that, I can pull that up at some point early on, that we categorized the 4 data streams from an enrollment perspective, adequacy, suitability, but also facility conditions, and then created a priority score for your campuses. And you might remember a graph that had a lot of reds. And the most number of reds is still in Area 2. You acted on some of that, but then a big strategic priority going forward is to right-size that even more going forward. Thinking about opportunities to potentially consolidate further campuses, looking at rebounding certain campuses, the programming that you created as part of the 7 through 12 piece, that's obviously a good start. And so just keeping tabs on that, thinking about, is that a catalyst for you to create some further opportunities, not just from the consolidation front, but giving a pull strategy, giving your families great reasons to continue to invest in your schools and your district. So that's an overarching theme that we will be emphasizing. And related to that, but on the opposite side of that, is the growth story in Area 4. So you're seeing significant growth in that area as of your last demographic study. But there are risks with that because you do see charter systems moving in. And so continuing to keep tabs on that growth and finding ways to invest and capture that growth in meaningful ways, whether that is, again, through some rebounding, adding some classrooms, which you've already done in some buildings, some schools, but continue to think about that growth strategy given the means, the limited means you have from a capital perspective, or seeking further new capital down the road to be able to capture that growth. That's going to be another area of emphasis here. And you do have some assets potentially you can leverage towards that. And so thinking about that holistically and broadly and finding ways to capture that growth has got to be one of the strategies going forward. The risk with not doing that, obviously, is there are systems that can take advantage of the growth and then create a vicious cycle for you that there is a worry that if this growth is not captured in a set number of years, we don't know what that is, that growth trajectory might flatten, worst case, even decline. So this is something that I'm sure as a board and as a community, you're acutely aware of. It's just something that needs to be given some hard and fast, black and white words, and that's what that is. And related to both 1 and 2 is the facility conditions itself. I want to give kudos to your staff for doing an amazing job of maintaining your facilities given your capital conditions, right? But a facility condition is not strictly what's visible. There's a lot of invisible elements to a building that was built 40 years ago, 50 years ago, that's original to the building. When we build a facility conditions index, it's both the visible components, but also the invisible components. So there are tried and true data around roughly a third of the building's life cycle is where more than half of its repair costs are due. So you're approaching that threshold in multiple sites and multiple campuses. So even though your team does an amazing job of upkeep, that still doesn't account for the things that are behind the walls. So you may see, like we were just having a sidebar conversation about older cities, you have water lines break, you've got sewer lines break. Everything might be okay up front, the roads may be paved beautifully, sidewalks may be in great shape, but the things that are invisible come due at some point, and that is sort of the story that needs to be acknowledged overtly, and that's what that third bucket is. So we've developed, based on this broader strategic priority, 6 action types. 2 of those are related, action 1 and 6. But essentially, it's about thinking about right-sizing your facilities to serve the needs of your students. This is always a hard choice, and kudos to this board for making hard choices. But this is something that continues to be a point of emphasis, because ultimately it's about making sure that you serve your stakeholders well. And so how do we do that is to try to right-size your investments so you can maximize value for your stakeholders. So thinking about Area 2 specifically, there's multiple sites, and we can get into specifics, but the point is there's multiple sites that are aging, that are under-enrolled, and if you layer on top of that, are they adequate to serve the needs of your students today? Are they suitable to serve the needs of your students tomorrow? And those were the ones that stood out in terms of high priorities. There's probably 8 or 9, even 10 campuses that are approaching, are either in red or approaching that red, that may be candidates for you to think about. That gives you an opportunity to right-size things, but also not just leave it at that, but think about programming that's attractive to your families, like you're beginning to do with your high school clusters. So thinking about those as a combined strategy might be a path forward for you to invest in. And we gave it a phase, and I'm gonna go through a suggested phase of emphasis for each of these, but in practicality, those will have to be adjusted because capital funding is going to be a significant part of this, and we know that's a challenge. If you don't have the capital to be able to make some of these investments, the phasing at this point, I'm gonna have to asterisk all of this, right? So everything has to be calibrated as you go forward and based on what your situation is. So in terms of emphasis, and we know this, phase 1 has to be, even though it's called phase 1 here, it has to be more than what you've executed in March, has to be more than that. Related to that, and related to the third bullet point in the strategic priority slide, is you've got at least 10 campuses that are really pushing the envelope on conditions. And this is where the capital intensity comes in, right? So you've got to be able to, and these are campuses that are decently enrolled, you're performing well, and there are campuses that may be on the edge conditions of both those, but if continued disinvestment happens, they will tend to age further, which may cause and exacerbate your under-enrollment, and these campuses might be pushed up for further consideration for consolidation down the road if no investments happen. So that's sort of the story there that we want to bake into this recommendation. And again, the investment is obviously very dependent on capital needs. So the phasing of it is totally dependent on your ability to galvanize your community towards action, to support you in this task of investing in your facilities. And we're going to rattle out about 3 of these action types that came directly from community engagement and were big contributors to adequacy and suitability scores. And you have, just to clarify, you have made investments in some of these, and you continue to, but just to kind of highlight that this is an area of emphasis that you want to carry forward because these are differentiators for how teachers are able to better support student learning and to provide the right types of learning experiences for your students. So technology infrastructure, there's multiple campuses, and we heard there's some inconsistencies in terms of how technology is represented, and so finding some overall, I'll get into detail of each of these in a minute, but just thinking about technology as a modernization tactic in making sure it's not just about focusing on the big elephants in the room, it's about making sure the little ones are done so you don't have future big elephants in the rooms. That's also part of this calculus. And safety and wellness, there was a lot of conversation about school safety, front office securitization, creating good indoor environmental quality. And so there's a bucket of actions around that. I know you've invested quite a bit in that already. There are some campuses that can continue to get those investments. Where feasible, older campuses are difficult to create natural light under. So there's some practicality issues there, but just acknowledge that this was a community yearning. There was a community need that was expressed multiple times in various ways. And so having some form of emphasis on that as you consider investments in your facilities, where practical, doing some of this outside of the securitization of front offices. What are some things you can do? That's another area of emphasis. Learning environment upgrades. There were, again, some points of emphasis made around partnerships, for example, business partnerships, partnerships with other entities that could provide broad learning experiences for your students. The traditional models seem to be doing really well too, is thinking about upgrades along those lines as you think about growth, as you think about consolidation and repurposing. Learning environments as a broad focus is also an equally important measure. And I mentioned Action 6 is related to Action 1 in a way, but on the opposite side of that spectrum is the growth planning. It's thinking about how do you capture that growth. And so these are the broad, big buckets. I do have detail on each one of them. And this is still a high-level detail. Our report is, as I mentioned, a phone book. It's got a lot of information in it. And so our goal is to continue to further this with you. We do know that you're considering a committee of sorts to further these ideas, and we would volunteer time to be a part of those committees to provide our information to those committees as they're considering these ideas. So some specifics, just in terms of consolidation, closure, and reboundaries. Phase 1 is ongoing. Thinking about facilities and assets you have, leasing them, selling them, thinking about creating capital to be able to invest either in your action type 1 or action type 2 of various sizes. That's going to be a consideration. And I mentioned strategic consolidation of additional schools within Area 2. As challenging as it is, it gives you a level of fiscal sustainability to be able to continue to backstop the district's success. And thinking about programming across the board. And this is one example of this. I want to qualify that any names you see are just samples of not specifically this is what you should do, but here are the examples of what you could do. That's the way you want to interpret this. And I did mention partnerships, finding ways to invest in ways, finding like-minded people to be able to be part of this journey would be a good one. Did mention comprehensive campus renovations, improvements, rebuilds. We have identified for Ms. Rodriguez and her team a significant chunk of work that could be a part of the state grant effort. And I know they're handicapped too, but identifying the problems is the first step in coming up with a solution. We do work with a lot of school districts. Mr. Buchholz specifically has a lot of experience in that space. And so we're big on clogging the pipeline, which is a good thing in this case. So when and where money is available, that you're shovel ready with projects. So that may be a consideration that you carry forward, given the lack of capital at this point. Any monies you can get to upkeep where reasonable is important. The key differentiator there is no regret repairs, because this is the big difference when you act based on obvious information versus a strategic capital plan, which gives you a broader purview. And thinking about, for example, if you have facilities that might have to be retired for various reasons, you just want to triage those as best as possible with life safety, accessibility, fire safety, weatherization, important repairs only. And so that's what we call no regret repairs. And so trying to be purposeful about how you go about doing it, and we're going to develop a rubric for Ms. Rodriguez and her team to be able to use specifically checkboxes, essentially, that allows you to make those choices without simply thinking about acting on a response or an ask from a site right away. So that's important. And I didn't mention this. Go ahead.
Excuse me, if I may, just kind of add to that. So the conversation that we're having around how we invest the limited capital money that we do have, and when we met with the Grace team, was establishing a protocol, establishing a checklist, if you will, of how do we prioritize in the investments that we make in our facilities so that our facilities team has those guidelines. What are the priorities to go to the school facilities board for grants? We want to make sure that we're being thoughtful about it because there's just limited resources all the way around. So I just want to thank Severnon and his team for helping us kind of put that protocol together, and that's how we'll be moving forward when we assess where we invest our capital money in the repairs. Again, like Severnon said, life safety is always going to have to get taken care of. But, where do we repair the carpet? What's the schedule for the roofs? Those types of things that our team will be putting together, and we'll be bringing back capital improvement proposals to you with the budget.
Thank you. So I did mention, this is just a little bit more detail, some examples of buildings that are past that 60 to 65% threshold. So the 60 to 65% threshold for the Facility Conditions Index, that's sort of a national benchmark I mentioned earlier. More than half of a building's repair cost comes due in the last third of its life cycle. And that's sort of a national standard we typically follow. So when buildings are approaching that 55 to 65% FCI, that's an aggregate. And typically, there's visible elements within a building that are able to be upgraded. Mechanical units, AC units, for example, get upgraded, roofing gets upgraded. But the structure, underground plumbing, behind-wall plumbing, major electrical systems, those are not typically upgraded. And if you go 40 years into a life cycle, building codes, for example, evolve every 5 years. So there may be things that are literally buried that nobody knows is in what condition. And again, that's not to be alarmist, but that's just being factual about things do come due. So the general rule of thumb is, where capital is available, I should qualify, is when you have a building approaching that 60 to 65%, you're better off replacing that building than continuing to repair it. So that's sort of a threshold. There are several buildings on your portfolio that are already there. And we do apply what we call deterioration curves. So when we do these assessments, it's typically in a given year. So we don't come back and do it every year, right? But there are industry standard curves we can apply to it, saying there's a do-nothing scenario, what happens to these facilities? So we've done that, and it's getting redder, right, as you might imagine. So this is just, again, not to be alarmist, just to try to highlight the reality of what it is. And so, again, capital, that's kind of where this is coming back to, and assets, being able to invest in facilities. And there are other improvements that you could be making outside of the facility conditions piece to various campuses, and you've highlighted a few of them. And if many of those are not part of any consolidation plans, it might be wise to consider investing in them to improve them. For if they do, for example, if you revamp programming at a certain site, and in a year or two or three, enrollment stabilizes, but then investments to those environments to continue to keep that group of people who are choosing your schools is important. So that's sort of what this highlights. And there may be challenges to this, obviously, because if you're consolidating certain facilities, you're not going to be putting money into those. That's where the no regret investments comes in, right? So thinking about it from that perspective. There are possible repairs to certain campuses. Again, this is not entire campuses, specific parts of campuses that were highlighted in the facility conditions report. Older schools, strangely, were built better. Back then, 100 years ago, they built things way better. To last 100 years, we don't do that anymore. But there are improvements you could be making to continue to capture the amazing schools that you've got. And so what does that look like? So that's another consideration, thinking about that over the long term. Funding, again, phase 2, any kind of renovation, improvement, rebuild is capital intensive. So grant money is not going to do that for you. It's going to have to be other means. And so this is maybe an area where, as a group, as your committee begins to wrap their minds around this, and if there's priorities that emerge within this broad list, what is the ask going to have to be to support that? And so that's sort of how this process plays out. In technology, I know that the district has made significant investments. There's still some spotty areas of connectivity that we heard more often. So those are things that I would imagine in due course that you would continue to correct. But also thinking about what kids have access to these days, thinking about technology access, bandwidth in the world of AI, what is that going to be? So thinking about this from a future forward mindset is important, not just based on what you're doing today. We do develop a lot of educational specifications for districts based on future readiness, and technology investments specifically are a significant part of that. Bandwidth required, as you know, is a lot to be able to do things in real time. So thinking about that broadly and having a committee or a group being tasked with just that as a responsibility might be a good idea. And again, classroom display standardization, this was something that we kept hearing about during our community engagements and adequacy and suitability walks. I know you've made improvements along these lines, but trying to think about standardization provides opportunities for every school site to provide more or less consistent services across the board. How does that play out? That's a conversation. And we talked about network infrastructure. There were discussions about flexible furniture and other types of investments related to technology. There was also some mention about alternative types of emphasis, project-based learning, and specifically maker spaces. And one of the things we always recommend is anything you do that's novel, pilot is a good way to go, like what you're doing with your 7 through 12. So you don't, because you're a big portfolio and you don't have a lot of resources, so you have to be responsible with anything novel. So you already know that. I just have to state that for the record. That's trying to pilot things is always a good way to find out, first of all, if it works, and if it does, what needs to be improved. So anything you do, that's a standard recommendation to pilot. And again, emphasis on outdoor technology, things that we heard, this just bakes that in. And doesn't mean every campus gets this. It's just something that you might consider as part of a conversation, creating some protocols to what Ms. Rodriguez said, not just on the repair side of things, but also even investments such as technology and different types of learning. There's protocols you can create too. Like we did this at Gilbert Public Schools, for example. We quantified for them what outdoor learning should be, because outdoor learning can be so abstract. And if an ask comes from a school site, hey, I need to create outdoor learning. So what does that mean? So we created a protocol there where it's sort of an assessment. Do you have access? Is that safe access? Is that area where it's shaded? Is there a way you can open up some classrooms to provide that access? So we can create some protocols around that. And I would highly encourage you to do that for a lot of different asks so you are responsible with these investments. That's the key there. And safety and wellness, I know that the securitization projects have been done over the last several years. There are maybe a few more campuses. I know there's cameras and other types of scanners and visitor management that are always evolving, just continuing to keep tabs on that. And then thinking about air quality was something that kept coming up in our engagements. And I know your team's doing an amazing job given the resources they have. But again, this is to just highlight that these were important considerations that came up, that if there's opportunities to provide some improvements, like for example, natural lighting where possible, or if you're building a new campus or a new site, this may be a great way to start with. This is the way we want to do this because this is a community ask. Our assessment doesn't do what an ADA audit is typically. We just, if there's something that's visible, that we will document that. But an official ADA audit is always a good thing. Make sure, for two things. One is you're able to correct things that are beyond compliance, and it also seems to be a fairly high liability issue just to get out of that. So that's a standard recommendation we have when we do a capital plan, is to do a informed ADA audit and any remediation plans that you might have to do as part of that. And athletic upgrades, they always come due within a 10-year capital plan. Even if you've done them within the last 5 years, there's going to have to be some emphasis on athletics. It's a huge catalyst for growth and enrollment. So making sure that you have the means, capital or M&O, to be able to support those athletic needs is always a point of emphasis that you want to keep. Talked about learning environment upgrades. The traditional school models seem to be working well for you, that's obviously something that you may want to think about expanding across the entire grade level spectrum. I know Mesa is opening a traditional high school this fall. So thinking about what is resonant with your community and making sure you provide those resources, either as part of a consolidation plan or a repurposing plan of some sort, and having access across your district, finding ways to do that while you're engaging in other types of learning. So you're meeting as many students as possible. I think that's sort of a recommendation that we have. Some library revitalization, this should not be news to you. There's several campuses that could obviously get some renovations or repurposing or rehab or refurbishment of library spaces. And why we highlight this specifically is libraries are not what they used to be. And many of your campuses were built 30, 40, 50 years ago when we built these big libraries. And we do a lot of library renovations, and they get repurposed into all sorts of interesting spaces, especially if you're seeking to build community partnerships, for example. Those could be great spaces. Typically, libraries have better access to the outside than other spaces. So you can manage that access, create partnership investments and interfaces without compromising the security of the facility. That's one example of it. There's other types of repurposing that happens with library spaces while still maintaining fundamental purpose of a library, which is literacy. So again, just trying to provide some examples of that. Again, pilot, anything you do, pilot. CT lab upgrades, I know some of that happened in other campuses, but just continuing to focus on that as you investigate partnerships with JTEDs. I'm sure you'll continue to invest in those areas. And again, outdoor learning, baking that as a part of a learning environment upgrade. Some specific campuses brought that up, but that doesn't mean it only belongs there. It belongs in other areas too. And in Area 4 specifically, lots going on up there. There's huge investments going on in the Industry 4.0 space, and so trying to find some opportunities to invest in your schools in that area to prepare students towards that workforce might be a good consideration. Not just there, but it probably is a catalyst for that region. Perhaps other regions might take on that plus something else. Yeah, and then the last one, which is probably going to be a bit of a recap. Thinking about Area 2, there's specific campuses that have significant enrollment pressures already in Area 4. But again, as we mentioned earlier, if the investments don't happen to capture that growth, that story might pivot to the opposite side. And so that's always the worry. There are ways potentially that you could capture that growth without necessarily needing a new school. There's things that you already done to do that at Liberty, for example. So adding classrooms or doing utilization studies, that's something that we've done as well, where you find capacity within existing spaces by just managing time, not just in terms of where things happen. So there may be ways like library renovations is a favorite one that we do. We're doing this in other districts that are growing. In your case, you're growing and declining, but in other districts where they're growing, but they can't get funded from the state or can't pass a bond, libraries get repurposed to classroom space to capture that growth. So there's things you can do to capture that without necessarily adding a new school. So there's things, but ultimately that's the solution if the growth continues to grow, continues to improve. But there are ways you can backstop that in the meantime. And then this is sort of a general recommendation is at least on a biennial basis, continuing to keep tabs on the data. Like good example is when we did this 6 months ago, I'm sure FCIs have changed to the negative possibly even more, but your enrollment's probably adjusted a little bit. So there's things that always evolve, and I know this is a hard lift with everything else that's going on, but it'd be good to have an update at least on yearly or a biennial basis on these major data streams. So you are acting with a factual foundation all the time. So that's sort of a high-level recommendation too. So anyway, that's the gist of the information I wanted to present. We are specifically, I'm not going to speak to this specifically, but we're creating a campus-specific dashboard that takes that information and creates specificity around what could happen in each campus. And that'll all be part of the report. Right now, we're tracking to complete the report by the end of the month, taking your feedback, and then any further action that you're anticipating as part of this effort. As I mentioned, if there's a committee setting that you're creating as part of this, we're more than happy to be a part of that and continue to provide our information to them as they're considering this in a broad, factual basis.
Thank you, Mr. Bala. So we do have Mrs. Rooks available on phone. I think she'll be here later on this morning. Mrs. Rooks, would you like to ask any questions this time before we move on to other board members? You want me to come back to you?
No, I can go ahead and start. Thank you. First, I'll ask, because it was just mentioned, that we are starting some type of a committee. I don't know what committee that is in regards to.
So I wasn't suggesting you're starting a committee, but I was saying that typically these sorts of efforts are handled in some sort of a committee setting. That would be a recommendation from us for you to do that.
And thank you, President Toby, if I may, Ms. Rooks. So in the past, we have had a citizen advisory committee that we have utilized to look at these types of needs for the district. Typically, it is a committee that will assess, this is amazing data. This is great data. And so the plan is to have a citizen advisory committee, and that could be a superintendent committee, that could be a board committee. We can talk about what that committee makeup looks like. But the purpose of that would be to come back to the board with some recommendations. Potential recommendations may be we ask for a bond or not, or they may come back to the board with some recommendations for consolidations, closures. So the last time in the phase one, we had a lot of community engagement meetings. And all of that information is captured in this report. So if we now have this good data, we take this to a committee, and then the committee then formulates different recommendations to bring to the board. So that is our vision for next steps with all of this. And that can happen and start as soon as this fall. If we are going to make any additional recommendations, consolidation, closures for next year, I would like to see us starting in the fall so that we aren't making these decisions towards the end of the year when we've got now school closures happening, families need to make decisions, things like that. So then that's the reference to the committee that we were speaking to.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. I appreciate that. The other question I had is there was mention on one of the slides of bathroom designs, ADA, and then there was a student wellness center. I guess my question is, with regards to bathroom designs, would it only be for ADA and no other changing of the designs? And then student wellness center, I don't know what that is, if that's just something the district has been looking at, or if this is just from Grace Design Studios. I don't know what those are.
So the bathroom, restroom design and conditions, mostly that was the commentary that came up during the community engagements, is the conditions of those. And so improvements towards that, and obviously making restrooms safer as part of that would be a consideration. And the wellness impact of that, typically what we heard had to do with the conditions of the facilities, lighting, indoor air quality, just occupant wellness piece of it. If we did mention anything specific to a wellness center, it probably came up in a conversation somewhere. And so that's not something that we're necessarily recommending you should do, but it was just a capture of information that if you were to consider actualizing these going forward, you have to think about how something like that might be meaningful to you or not.
Okay, I was just, because I saw it on the presentation slide of mention of Student Wellness Center at the high school, so I didn't know what that was. And then the bathroom designs, I guess with safety-wise, are we just talking about repairing them, or are we talking about, I guess, redesigning them into a different layout, I guess, is where I'm kind of going with that.
Yeah, the commentary on this was about the conditions of the bathrooms. So the configuration that it takes would be totally up to you. If you were to further a committee or a school site might have a specific idea as to what that renovation might take, but our emphasis is to improve restrooms from a conditions perspective and also making sure that they're safe.
Okay. Just two more questions. Peoria Traditional and Coyote Hills, is there any ideas on the land that we currently still have of looking at from that perspective of, I don't know, building a smaller school for Peoria Traditional? I don't know if that's still on the table as a discussion or not.
Thank you, President Tobey. Ms. Rooks, we are exploring all of those possibilities. And again, that would be something that a Citizens Advisory Committee would come together, look at. We do know that the program that we have at our current Peoria Traditional is very, very successful with our students. And it has been discussed quite a bit that they would have their own school. What that looks like right now, we are venturing to say that there is possibilities as we go through our conversations about closures and consolidations, that would be something that I think the community would definitely support moving forward. So do we have any plans right now? No, but we do have that idea in our planning sessions as we go forward into next year.
Okay, and then thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. Do we have, I know it was mentioned a little bit in the presentation, but do we have any finalized plans for supporting Cactus High School, Kachina and Pioneer students being moved around with all the different changes? Like, is there any actual plans for the start of the school year in August, and what do those kind of look like?
So President Tobey, Member Brooks, can you kind of give me a little bit more of what you're asking as far as what the plans are? We are currently modifying the facilities. We are currently making sure that furniture moves are made, that upgrades are made to Cactus and to Pioneer to welcome the new students. Also, we've looked at some upgrades to Foothills and Canyon, also for the increased enrollment that they'll be receiving.
Thank you for bringing that part. I guess also just the fact of what are the plans in communicating with families, meet the teacher nights, supporting the staff in the upcoming school year, if questions they have, where's kind of like just all of those plans per se of supporting the families and the staff and the students in those changes that are being made.
President Tobey, Mrs. Rooks, good morning. It's Danielle Airy speaking. Just wanted to share with you that we are well underway with communication efforts and a number of supports for the current families that may be impacted in any way. And so at the start, it was their current principal that was doing a lot of the communication and connection, and we've transitioned that now to the principal and the school that will be receiving those new students. And so they've got communication that lets them know right down to the very detail of transportation information, how their current lunch accounts will transfer over to their new school so that if they have funds remaining, it will be waiting for them at the start of the new school year. also a number of supports that are taking place at the school where they will be attending some special things just for them to make sure that they're feeling acclimated and supported at the new campus. I know even before the school year ended, the principals that were welcoming new students had opportunities for families to come and meet the principal, meet some of the teachers, tour the campus. So I just want to say there's a whole team around the principals supporting them from here at the district level, but really the principals are taking the lead and doing a phenomenal job of opening their arms to those new families and making sure they feel connected and supported. I know in particular, and I believe you mentioned Cactus High School and the new model that will be going in there. Mrs. Hammer and the team at Cactus High School has some extra special things planned for those incoming 7th and 8th graders that are taking place over the summer in July, leading right up to the start of the new school year. So a whole team there supporting them and connecting with those families. I do want to add that program at Cactus High School that will have the 7th and 8th graders is now currently on a wait list. So we have 357 students enrolled there, which is just really exciting because I think it means that the governing board made the right decision and that there really is a draw there for that program. We have a number that are open enrolling into that program where there's space or that are inquiring daily about open enrollment into that program. And so we're also very excited to share that.
Okay, thank you. I guess just as we roll into June and July, if we can just have updates of messages going out to families, staff, if they have questions, because when we voted on that decision, I just want to make sure that as a board, we're also making sure that we support in that decision and making sure that it's a smooth transition for the student staff.
Mrs. Rooks,
And then that's my last question.
I just wanted, this is Mrs. Airy again, just wanted to let you know we can absolutely make sure that the board gets a copy of those communications.
Okay, yep, thank you. And President Toby, that's my last question.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Rooks. Moving on, Mrs. Ewing, comments, questions?
Great, thank you, President Toby. So a couple of questions. I know that throughout your presentation, you suggested kind of some opportunities for expansion with our STEM programs, which I think a lot of that, I don't know if that's the CTE programs.
It's under learning environments.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
It's under learning environments?
Yes, so my question is from visiting various different high schools and so forth, I know that we have some CTE programs that are in high demand. We have students that are on wait lists, like I think culinary was that. And then we have other CTE programs that we're constantly trying to fill those. And so I'm just wondering, as we look at this as a whole, and we also look at, like one of the great things I think with the Cactus model is that we were able to bring those career explorations down to the 7th and 8th grade, and our community seems to really value that. And so are we looking at, in the system, which CTE programs we should be expanding on? And if we do this committee, will the committee have that information as well?
So typically, a committee of this magnitude gets information from a broad set of players: finance, teaching and learning, HR, and obviously capital, maintenance and overrides. So yes, so what I've seen is your teaching and learning and curriculum and instruction staff would be modeling some of these ideas and bringing that to the conversation, and that can guide the committee into making specific recommendations as to what programming should possibly be placed in what region or what area.
President Toby, Mrs. Ewing. We've also been working with the RCTE director as well as our entire curriculum team at looking at schedules for next year as well as then expanding into the future. So they're doing that exploration right now and the work to make a lot of the programs that have been traditionally focused at the high school level and bring it down to the 7th and 8th grade level. So making sure that we have all of the next steps.
Okay, great, thank you. Because for instance, I know like the IB program is amazing over at Ironwood, and there have been discussions before about how do we bring that and create a really big pipeline for that over at Ironwood.
Yeah, yes, actually, with Dr. Hernandez, we had started that work, and so we had evaluated whether looking at Copperwood potentially as a potential for that. So that is something that we can continue to explore.
Okay, great. And then the other thing that as we make these decisions is, do we have any data as to why students leave our district, or it's not so much leave our district and go to other schools, so that we can continue to look at how do we bring value to our district for those families that do decide to leave if they think the grass is greener on the other side. So, because I just didn't see that in this part, but just would want to be able to have that perspective when making decisions.
President Toby, Mrs. Ewing, thank you for that question. We do have that data. I will say that data has been difficult to capture consistently across every campus in the past. We are doing a better job of that now, at being more consistent rather, and just making sure we're asking the right questions every time a family withdraws. So as long as we have that connection point with the family at the time of withdrawal, we're able to capture that and input that in the system. So we do have that. I wouldn't say the historical data there is as strong as we would have liked it to be, but we're getting better going forward at capturing it.
Okay, and then my last question is just, I know that I think every school, but especially public schools, have a larger special needs population, students on IEPs and so forth. And so I know sometimes public schools lose students and families because they feel like we don't have enough to equip to actually help their child be successful. So in this, because a lot of these expansions we're talking about is how do we create learning environments. I feel like it's directed at that average student and not really how do we better design our learning campuses to fit all of our students. So I'm just wondering how that perspective is built into this.
No, that's a good question. It is a gap, as you pointed out, and that's something that we need to fill with conversations with the district leadership.
Okay, I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Ewing. Mrs. Bowles, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Ewing, for bringing that up, because I was going to suggest that it's, and we have research to prove this, that it's better to add to a typical campus than to make a campus of all special needs, or we know that historically right now where we're sitting in our district. So to have campuses that support all students, that's a no-brainer to me. So some of the things that I have questions on, when was our last ADA audit? Do you know?
I do not know that. No.
And how many, did I say ADA?
Yeah,
okay. Do you know, or no? Nobody knows. Okay. And then how long in between are those audits done, did you say?
Well, certain states have mandates on doing an explicit ADA audit. Arizona does not. So it totally depends on your district's needs. I would say at least every 5 years would be ideal. And it's pretty comprehensive. A traditional ADA audit is very comprehensive. It looks at access from the outside to the inside and also between spaces. So we do perform that in other states based on their specific requirements, like Texas, for example, has some rubrics around that. So I would say at least every 5 years.
Okay. So we did an upgrade at the DAC just in the last few years, correct, in the bathrooms? So how did that come about? Does anyone know that?
President Toby, Mrs. Bowles, if my memory is serving me correctly, because Mr. Molino did work very closely on this, we did receive an ADA complaint, and we had some very serious ADA concerns here at this building. And so we made some changes both within our parking lot as well as the main restrooms here, because this is used as a community space, and we wanted to make sure we made our facilities here up to code with ADA.
Okay, I was hoping you said we had an audit, but it was a forced thing, but anyway, but I'm glad we did it. So just a suggestion, that may be with our new position for, I don't remember the title that we used, but for the parents, the complaints, that position that we still have, I'm assuming. Yeah, the support parents position. Maybe admin, when they start to hear complaints from a family, rather than wait until they got one foot out the door, you can say, hey, why don't you talk to this person, give them a list of programs we have. I know as a parent, you know, when you're working and you've got schedules already made and all these other things, the last thing you want to do is change up the school and everything for the school year. I know a parent will do it if need be, but if we can catch them before, to me, that's a no-brainer. Maybe giving, you know, the admin on campus to facilitate that and then send them to that, you know, they work together, the parent support person. The classroom displays, I have to bring this up. I'm assuming that we are working on grants for some of that as well? Okay, that's good. And then I had a couple others, but this one I want to ask. So we have, you had said 10 urgent schools that need facility upgrades. I'll just say that. Can we, so I know that Mesa, when we first started this process of the 7th and 8th grade program at Cactus, that somebody, I think it was Dr. Hernandez and someone else, went over to Mesa to see their program. I'm pretty positive it does not mirror their program, which is absolutely fine. I know we're ahead of the curve because of just the work I do every day, and that right now we have where we're building a CTE program for 7th and 8th graders. Is there ever, I know we talked about this in the boardroom, but are we still talking with Westmac about bringing them in and bridging the gaps, whether it be 7th and 8th grade or even into high school at the same campus if need be?
Yes, President Toby, Member Bowles. Yes, we are in constant communication with Westmac. Our CTE director, Chad, is always looking for ways to improve our programs. He has made significant amount of investments in some different programs this year. We are always hoping to build the programs here, and Westmac to support us with the design and the curriculum, but we feel it's in the best interest of our students to be able to stay on their home campuses whenever possible when we have the programs that the students want and need.
Thank you for that. So we have, just gathering from all the information, 10 urgent schools that facility issues mainly. We have traditional school that is overflowing with students on a campus that's already overflowing with students, right? Just the gen ed non-traditional school students. So is it possible for us to use some of these schools, and I know you mentioned about combining programs, but we're talking about traditional, we're talking about, let me back up, Mesa also has a campus that is strictly for homeschool. We've been talking about this forever. I think we need to make that move because we have a lot of homeschool in Peoria. And if we, I don't know if it would be fit a whole entire, campus, but that's going very, very well for them. And I think it would be a disservice if we didn't at least look at that. And then also getting to know families, and I guarantee you there's going to be some, I'll say math because that is brought up the most. I don't want to teach that at home. I don't want to homeschool. I want to send them to to our e-campus, or we can now steer them into, into a direction that we know on our campuses. I do plan on touring all of those. I had one set up for May and I had to cancel it, but I'd be more than willing to bring more information back, but it's very, very successful for them. And then the other campus I was thinking is the CTE. The CTE program, the 7th and 8th, if we already have a waiting list and it hasn't began, pretty sure that we're going to need that 7th and 8th on our other campuses and/or, using one of the schools for that. So I think that is all that. I do have one more question. I'm sorry. Actually, two. I heard, I think it was Aries, Ms. Aries speak with President Rooks and say that we have support on campus for programs, but do we have support? I'm going to probably be a dripping faucet with this one. Do we have support for Cactus admin that we're going to continue that support and not just dump it? And I'd like to know, like, as we move out and roll this program out, what support that is. And honestly, I would be willing to volunteer because that's a big job. And they need support. So if you can let the board know what support, what you're not, you don't have capacity for, I would appreciate that. And then how soon would we need to establish these committees? Yesterday? Last year?
Okay, I was going to say, we're all doing that, like, who's next? Mr. President Toby, Mrs. Bowles, so with regard to support for Cactus, it's actually in one of our next presentations, and so thank you for asking, because absolutely, we believe that the success of this rollout doesn't end on August 3rd when the students show up, and so we know that we will need to continue to monitor and support and help out where we need to. So we're putting together those structures, and we've been having meetings about that already. So we'll continue to do that. One of the wonderful things about Principal Hammer is that she's not afraid to ask. So we always feel very comfortable that where there is a need, we'll know about it. But we also want to anticipate as well as so not waiting for her to get there. So right now we're focused on staffing and making sure that every classroom has a teacher, that they have the sections they need, and then the curriculum and instruction team has been working really hard to make sure that we're all those teachers are ready for this new model. So it's all hands on deck.
Thank you for that. That's all I have. Sorry, do you have a comment?
Yes, thank you, President Toby. Member Bowles, the committee work, as I had stated earlier, we are hoping to get that launched in August. So we'll have a couple of meetings with the governing board around the ideas of that and what that committee structure will look like. And then our hope is to launch it in August.
Okay, thank you for that. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mrs. Bowles. Mrs. Profit.
We'll just start with the committees. I think we've already had it. It's already on our future agenda item. So as soon as we can get that done, obviously the sooner the better. We have so much coming up, a superintendent search. I just want to make sure that we don't put the cart before the horse. And so my ask would be is to start moving forward with consolidation closure recommendations. What I don't want to happen is, we potentially hire a superintendent, go through that whole process, then that superintendent once a year. I don't want this to turn into a bathroom situation where the reason why some of our bathrooms are in such disrepair is because we've been talking about it for so many years and we have not been able to pull the trigger. And so I feel like if we get in the weeds too much with the programming, which is super important, but we first need to deal with facilities and right sizing to understand where our capacity is to expand programming. So again, my ask would be is that we really focus on, especially in sector 2, is exactly what's going to happen. I mean, I have assumptions. I think it would be a great idea to move Peoria High School to the 7-12 model and be implementing Cactus, thinking about that being a possibility. I know that's probably something we have all thought about. Again, I just don't want to get too much into the details when we have big decisions to make first before we can even start to consider what's possible. Yeah, I won't even talk about programming, but I actually had the opportunity to go to the West Met graduation. My niece was graduating, and she's in Deer Valley District. And it was so unique because Deer Valley does not have the CTE opportunities on campus like we do. And that is something that we can provide on campus that no other district around us can. And so continuing to lean into that CTE, along with our partnership with WestMec when we can't facilitate it ourselves, is something that we provide that charter schools simply cannot provide. And so continuing to lean on to what we do better than anyone else with workforce readiness, I think is a really smart way to approach recapture. I think there is a lot of recapture opportunities. There are other charter schools going up, but it's just a different school with a different set of problems. And I think a lot of parents are realizing that as they choose other things and then hope to come back. So just continuing to think about that. And again, I will always advocate for this. I think the expansion of the traditional model is absolutely vital to our success moving forward. I have some ideas about that. I don't want to say them because I don't want to cause a panic of any ideas that I might have, but I would love to see the expansion of North PTS getting its own campus and then potentially proposing a closure repurpose in the south. And I would love the closure repurpose, all that thing. In my perfect world, we would be doing this. Having the committee announcing in the same timeline with this year and then making those decisions so that we can bring back and continue to reinforce our programming without investing money in campuses that potentially could be repurposed anyways. To your point, we don't want to be putting money in, putting a Band-Aid on a fire hose, so to speak. So those are my thoughts, but again, just one step at a time, and let's not get totally stuck in steps 2 through 6. And I'm anxious to make some forward momentum with repurpose and closures.
President Toby, can I ask one more question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Have we looked into, I don't know who this would be, the city council, I think, I don't even know, but knowing that our Peoria High School is a historical site, have we looked into funds, other places that they could help us with some of the preservation on that campus?
President Toby, Mrs. Bowles, that's a good question. It's the old main building that is on Peoria High School's campus that is the historical building. And so we did receive some support for, memorializing that, right outside of the building. And we worked very closely with the city of Peoria on that particular project. A number of the buildings surrounding Old Main, a couple of them are actually newer-ish, which is probably not a technical term through Grace Designs, but they were based on some past available bond funding, I think in the early 2000s, if my memory is serving me correctly. So I don't know that the rest of the campus is necessarily eligible for any of those, but like Mrs. Rodriguez always says, we are always looking at grant funding opportunities or partnership opportunities so we can continue to keep our eyes open.
Okay, thank you for that.
No, good suggestion, Mrs. Bowles. Thank you, Mr. Bala, for you and your team putting this together. It's a little bit overwhelming to see all the data, but thanks for breaking it down in a way that we can digest, and hopefully our potential committee will be able to sift through at more finer detail. Just throwing this out, the 10 campuses that are in action type 2 that are urgent or very poor, I'd be curious to see which one of those campuses might be in that cactus cluster. I know we're talking about a future ballot initiative when it comes to asking permission for sale or lease of those schools, and I'm wondering if that could be, if any of those 10 are in that cactus cluster that could benefit from that vote moving forward. And then also thinking more business-minded, and I'm just talking out loud here, when it comes to businesses supporting or what has been often said is adopting a campus, providing for some capital needs and capital improvements that may not be within our purview to do at the moment. I'm looking for avenues as far as that goes at some of these schools to help with some of these. I think we could act on some of these action types simultaneously, but I agree with Mrs. Proudfit. Action type 1, the consolidation, closure, and repurposing is obviously the priority here. And then the committee, I do think that does have some value to kind of analyze more on a granular level. But I do think that we need to start putting our landing gear down for next year as far as for action type 1. But other than that, that's really all I have. Thank you again, Mr. Bala, for this information. Anything else that you wanted to close with?
No, I think the conversations that you're having are super meaningful, and Mrs. Proudfit, the investment in career-connected learning, that's, in my opinion, can't miss. And specifically, when you bring that to the middle school grade levels, that's usually where the leaks are in systems. And so trying to capture students early, giving them purpose, should they choose to continue on to a career-connected learning trajectory. Outside of that, just meaningful learning opportunities in schools. So again, I know these are challenging conversations to have, but we got to start somewhere, and that's what this is. And thank you for giving us the opportunity to continue to engage.
President Toby, I have a couple more questions or just comments. So with regards to the outdoor learning environments, I know that several of our campuses, we share the adjacent park with the city. So I would be curious if there were opportunities to talk with the city about how to make those spaces, kind of those outdoor learning environments that the school can use, but then it also benefits the city and improvements on that. So I don't know if that's something we've either have looked at or thought about with regards to that.
President Toby, Mrs. Ewing, that's a good thought, and one that our principals already, I believe, and our teachers utilize where they have that park. Some of that is really by design many, many years ago, and through our longstanding partnerships with the city as we are going into a community to partner alongside of them on just what makes sense for economic planning, development, and strong neighborhoods is to align a community park and a community school together. And so our schools already utilize those parks in many ways, not to mention some of the overflow parking that I know is often used when there's special events and things on the campus, because many, if not most, of our elementary schools have smaller parking lots that don't always accommodate for large-scale community events. So we are taking advantage already where there is a park right next to an elementary school and trying to maximize that use.
And then lastly, with the learning environments, I know that we have in the innovation core, I think that's what it's called up there. We have so many new businesses coming in, and so have we looked at approaching those businesses in terms of how do we
Unknown participant is now exiting.
She must be here. So have we looked at ways that they would like to see us add value to students that can help with that workforce readiness?
President Toby, Mrs. Ewing, yes, as those new businesses are coming into it's called often referred to, I think affectionately, as the PIC, Peoria Innovation Core. We are speaking with a number of them, AMCOR, and then adjacent to that with TSMC. We have been starting to build that relationship. Chad, our CTE director, has been closely working with their team, and we've had them out to the Met Professional Academy on a number of occasions, but having them not just come in and be with our students, but also talking to them about what our future workforce needs, how can we adapt our programming appropriately to ensure that we are supporting our students in a way that they're going to be ready for the workforce or whatever their next step may be when they leave. And so those conversations we are also hoping to expand. Starting with the Met is just sometimes a really good entryway for local businesses that are coming into our community to very easily work with our students, but we're expanding those to our other schools as well.
So has Grace Design seen where campuses, districts are now talking to organizations of not only how can we build programs, but also how to build those learning environments that are most, so I don't know if Grace has seen
Absolutely, and I was going to comment on this, whether you asked me that question or not. So I think the pieces of what you all have talked about, there is quite a bit of precedent across K-12 systems, not just the 9 through 12 systems, where there's partnerships, investments in career-connected learning right from kindergarten. I know we're talking middle school, but investments in CCRs from kindergarten. And then the whole workforce pipeline development investment piece from a business angle, we're personally involved in that. We've been teaching at a high school for 5 years now, design thinking and towards certifications for a couple reasons. One is to understand what happens in the classroom so we can better design classroom experiences. The second is the workforce development piece of it. And so there are opportunities where all of these pieces can connect, because foundationally, what this would represent is attractive options for your parents, because it addresses a lot of challenges that are structural in the K-12 system: student apathy, teacher availability, lack of funding. So when you connect all these dots, businesses that are interested and bring an inherent response to workforce development, they understand that investing in the K-12 system is a significant part of achieving that. Through that, you're creating attractive programming for your communities across the board. And then some capital dollars might also come our way, because we've seen that happen. And so I think the alchemy of how all of these can come together exists. It's just a matter of meaningfully putting them together while you're considering some of these larger capital challenges, right? So when we say no regret investments, sometimes you have to think about the then what, and it's very hard to do that, and I might have mentioned this last time too, is the challenge of what you were facing is enormous. But then the real solution is the then what. It's not what you're doing right now, it's the consolidation, but then the then what, right? Because if we don't address that, it's going to continue to be another problem that you face down the road. So as challenging as it is, you got to think about it as broadly as you can. And so we have seen that, and we continue to be a part of that in multiple avenues.
I just wanted to plant a seed. So there's an organization, one of the board members from WestMec is involved in this organization, and I'm actually not sure how closely they're tied, but it's called Project Search. To what Ms. Ewing was talking about, that's the SPED gap. So Project Search does workforce readiness for that very specific population of students, and they already have existing relationships with Fry's and some other local business partners to provide that WestMec workforce readiness experience to some of those students, and that might be something that we can potentially look into to provide a bridge just to create that relationship.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Proudfit. Yeah, and I do, going back to what you were saying earlier, Mr. Bala, about how athletics as well as CTE draws students in, I think if we capitalize on this and provide that direction to the committee, as far as this is kind of our focus once we do address action item 1, you know, this is something that we can offer that nobody else can, so. Agreed. But any other go backs? Okay, all right. So with that, I appreciate it. We'll give Mrs. Vicentainer some time to set up, so we'll go ahead and take a 5-minute recess and wait for Mrs. Bowles and Mrs. Rooks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving right along to section 3.2, leadership transition update. Hand it over to our interim superintendent, Mrs. Bissentainer.
President Tomey, members of the governing board, good morning. Members of the public, welcome. We are,
President Toby, if I may, is Heather Rooks on the phone?
Oh.
Yeah, thank you, because she was texting me.
Mrs. Rooks is on the phone.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you, Mrs. Rooks. So this morning, I wanted to walk through, first of all, a high-level overview of next steps and our plans for the next 30 to 60 days. Given the time frame, as you can imagine, it's going to be a lot about the beginning of the school year and getting us prepped and ready for that. In addition, we'll also then go into the next 120 days and walk through that. Following that standpoint, what I wanted to do is to, Terry, I was trying to, see, I end up scrolling. Okay, little technical errors. Oh, yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you very much. And then the next piece is I have a consolidation of position changes and requests that have come through. Many of the departments that have requested the positions are represented in the room. So we hope they are here to help answer any questions and make sure, or on the other side, hold me accountable for doing it justice. So we are, we'll work together to make sure that we have the people in place to get the work done that we need to. So the first piece is, okay. There, you know what I need to do? I just needed to turn it on. Oh, nope, I'm gonna scroll. I'm gonna just scroll. I'm good at scrolling, okay. All right, so the next 30 to 60 days, and thank you for the questions that were earlier, because I do think that is the piece that is right in front of us, and I don't want to zoom in too close and not stay strategic, but at the same time recognizing that we just as an organization undertook some major changes to our structure. So making sure that we have the right leadership in place, making sure that we have all of the positions filled that need to help us move forward, and to make sure that we have the structures to communicate and support each other through these processes. So I have some goals and deadlines for filling positions. We have where we brought back the Deputy Superintendent of Academic Services that had been paused. Now we are looking to fill that position again. Ideally, we'd like to have these positions filled no later than the 7th of July, which is that board meeting, so we can bring forward those recommendations. If there are any delays, we will let you know and keep you updated on this process. We also wanted to make sure that, and it's been great, we met yesterday with the curriculum and learning and operations teams, school teams, in terms of what does back to school look like in our training for our administrators. And so they had a lot of work already underway and planned. And so we just wanted to make sure that we continue to update and focus on those areas of concern that, you know, have really been highlighted heavily. So we wanted to make sure we can talk about it and everyone feels good about it, because there is that gap between when you're talking about mandatory reporting and that reasonableness. And so so making sure that everyone has clear guidance and understands, yes, when in doubt, call. So we continue the mandatory reporting as well as sustaining our investigation processes. And we will initiate the superintendent selection process. We know that that is something that, you know, I am in an interim position, so we want to make sure that we have the time frame and the runway needed for you all to find and select, as well in our community, participate in the selection of a more permanent position. Following the 60 days, we plan to provide updates on our strategic framework and our goals for 26-27, and for 27 and 28. So we'll work through that. We also need to provide factual support for ballot initiatives. We have Props 428 and 429. While we cannot advocate for those as a district, we can always provide information so that the individuals that are helping us support those efforts have the information they need for those to be successful. And as mentioned earlier, we are planning to kick off our Capital Strategies Advisory Committee, so we'll be back with the board to initiate that. We've also had some recent volunteers, so we'll be reaching out to all of them and getting them ramped up and ready to go. Our superintendent process will need to continue. Like I said, I believe in past years, it's taken us, several months to work through the identification of candidates and then the putting the process together, getting the candidates in if they're from out of state, and so forth. So those efforts will continue. And then really, like I said, just that implementation and support of Phase 1 initiatives. So we have some major changes. Pioneer is now will be Peoria Pathways. We have a great team getting on a lot of programs that are now coming onto one campus that haven't traditionally been together. So what does that look like and how do we support that? How do we make sure our Cactus new setup is working and that they have questions or running into any barriers that we can help remove those. And then also the new Canyon and Foothills K through 6, that is also a new model for us. And so there are elements of those pieces that we need to make sure that we have ready to go. And we wanted to add some enrichment to those programs as well, so it doesn't feel like just a whole piece of their, like a limb got picked up and moved off their campus, that no, there's still a whole body and that there is all of the support pieces in place to support them. So I'm sure there will be a lot more that we will be working on during this time frame, but these really are, wanted to just highlight the priorities. So as we had met and with all of you during the last meeting, these felt like the areas that we just needed to make sure that are solidified and ready to go. So I don't know if we want to pause for any questions or you want me to start rolling.
Board members, do you guys want to keep going through the presentation and save questions for the end?
I have a couple questions, sorry. Okay, so on the, so just going back, just because we're on that screen, can you tell me a little bit of the difference between the Prop 428, 429, and then differences of calling it a prop versus an override while we're just speaking on that?
President Toby, Mrs. Ewing, while I could make a best attempt at that, I think Mrs. Rodriguez may want to share that with you. So if you wouldn't mind if we came back to that question once she's able to rejoin us.
That sounds fine. Okay. And then the second thing is just with regards to the support phase of the changes that we're making across the pathways, the Cactus 7 through 12, and so forth. As we move through the school year and we think about that new group that's coming into, I guess, any of those, I've seen student ambassador programs work really well for helping those incoming students into the new environments and maybe taking the opportunity this year to build those ambassador programs because we know that students listen best to other students and not necessarily parents. So anyway, that would just be a suggestion on that piece. And then as far as on the superintendent hiring process, I know that there have been conversations before about going through that process where we talk about what values and what are the qualifications we're looking for. And we have done some of that work before, but I just wanted to emphasize it's really important that we still do that work and talk about values and qualifications so that those watching and those trying to understand what would it be like to come into this board and work with this board, that that individual is real clear on that. So just making sure that that's included in part of that. I know that's kind of the most, that's the part folks feel like we can move quickly through, but it is important for any potential future candidate to understand where our values are so we can make sure that that superintendent is a good fit with the board. That was my only other comment. Thank you.
Toby, Mrs. Ewing, thank you for that feedback, because actually, yes, as I go into any hiring process, there's always that moment where you have to sit back and say, what are we looking for? And having that clarity is critical, and I think it will make a very successful selection process.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Ewing. Just checking in, Mrs. Rooks, if you, since you're on the phone, just want to provide you an opportunity if you wanted to ask any questions.
Yes, thank you. President Toby, I had a question about, on this page specifically, the superintendent process. Have we had candidates already submitting applications? Is the application live? What are we kind of looking at in regards to that right now? Because I just don't know where we are with it.
President Toby, Mrs. Rooks, we have not posted the position at this time. Typically, my understanding of the selection process is, and what I was going to bring back to the board is exactly how you want to set up that process. So we haven't made those steps. I've had an individual reach out, and I just let him know that as soon as that we had a selection process ready to go, that we would include him in the vetting process.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Mrs. Rooks, or you good to move on?
Yeah, we can move on. If I have other questions at the end, I'll reach out.
All right. Mrs. Vizentainer, go ahead.
Thank you. So the next portion of this presentation is really, like I said, consolidation of requests for positions, and with each position. So just to let you know, at the end of this presentation, for those of you who didn't scroll ahead at home online last night, there is an accounting at the end in terms of the impact and the finances. So just want to make sure that if you have questions along the way, we will get there, and that information is available for you. The first position that had been requested is really a reconfiguration of our food services assistant director position, in that it is considered an assistant director position, but it has been set in 2022 as a classified exempt position. This takes it out of some of the benefits that go to an administrator in the district, including accrual of vacation days. So, and as you can see, a salary differential. So currently, the position is paying about $58,000. If we moved it to the assistant director salary schedule, the minimum for that position is $78,000. So there's $78,000. So this would be about a $20,000 increase, and it would be able to be paid out of the food service fees. This is not an M&O budgeted position.
President Toby, I have a quick question. So as we're, Mrs. Vizentainer, is that okay? Yes, okay. Mrs. Vizentainer, as you're talking about walking us through these reconfigurations on the requests and so forth, how is that determined? Is there, so just walk me through that process, because I know that folks who are looking at this are like, gosh, we just made this $21 million cut, and now we're looking at making all of these configuration changes that are costing more money. So I'm just curious, when we have departments go through and looking at their jobs, are they using a rubric, or how do they determine that reconfiguration is needed? And then how is it that when it's brought to HR that they're, saying, okay, this brings value and so forth. So just want to make sure that we're having that conversation.
Thank you, President Toby. Mrs. Ewing, that is an excellent question. And I will say how it comes to HR can come through several different ways. A lot of times what comes up is, as individuals or as positions are needed and identified, there's an initial look of where does it fit into our salary schedule and our structure. So we usually take the opportunity with any new proposal or any situation to, excuse me, to determine what is the position most like. We'll do some market research in terms of like what is a payout in the private sector, realizing that that isn't always feasible in the public sector, but we take a look at that. Then we do an external view, and then we also then do an internal review where we look at where are other positions in the organization of similar responsibilities, similar levels of responsibility and oversight when it comes to like specifically for any type of manager or supervisory position. So this is a position, for instance, so if I utilize this position, the food service assistant director, the food services department supports all 42 locations. And so it is quite a large job. Our director there, Sandra Slashow, has been an amazing director and is, and really led it. When the position was created in 2022, as much research as we did, we could not identify why they chose classified exempt grade 8. I think it might have been a decision at the time. But in terms of then from the equity standpoint, if somebody has the title of assistant director, having people with similar titles in different places on salary schedules can create some confusion and feelings of inequity and real inequities as well when it comes to that salary and overview. And so given the size and scope of this position, we felt it was time to, our recommendation and why we were bringing it forward at this time was to say, we believe it does meet the scope and responsibilities of an assistant director that is a district-wide for a large organization. Food service department employs easily 400 employees at any given time, and the turnover and the change and the things, just given the nature of the work, is huge. They also have grants and other administrative oversight to respond to. So we wanted to help build in that succession planning opportunity as well. Not that we expect Mrs. Slashow to go anywhere, but we always want to be prepared in that event.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Mrs. Vicentiner, I know we're going to be talking about a lot of different positions and then costs and then also savings in other areas. I don't mean to hijack your presentation, but maybe just for the community and for people watching online, if we can just, provide them the bottom line up front. So that way when we are talking through some of these changes in dollars as far as the impact, I don't know if you want to highlight that first to answer some questions as far as how you rebalanced everything.
Thank you, President Toby. Yes, if I could, I can scroll. All right. Everyone looks away for a second so you don't get dizzy. So what we did was we went through all the positions and tried to make sure that because sometimes you try to balance within your own department. This was not a situation that we were able to balance every position within every department. So we did look across the organization and try to make those changes. So anything from the M&O, I went ahead and bucketed all those positions together. I believe that Excel spreadsheet was attached to show the differentials and where those numbers were coming from. And then we looked at all the positions that we were reducing and said, okay, so what is our net value? So we believe that this is a savings of approximately $4,200, which is not a huge savings, but it is a savings, and we're able to capture and reclassify some folks and get them closer to a competitive and strategic standpoint in the district.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that because I know there's going to be a lot of dollars talked about as far as replacing people and then properly categorizing other people, but this really helps, at least me up front when I was looking at the presentation, so it hopefully helps the community as well to understand that this is actually a fiduciary type management style that you're approaching it with, so thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to scroll.
President Toby?
Okay.
Yes, go ahead, Mrs. Brooks.
Yes, if I may ask a quick question. So I'm just trying to better understand this. Is this, all these, reallocations, reconfigurations, is this beyond the scope of the 21 million reductions that we've had? I don't know if is this cost neutral? Is it adding? That's kind of where I was trying to better understand.
President Toby, Mrs. Rooks, so this is in addition to the $21 million reduction. This is an additional savings, potentially of about $4,200. So while we made reductions, sometimes as an organization, when you reduce an overall size, you have set yourself up in certain departments and certain areas where you don't necessarily have the workers and the skill sets where you need them to be. And so this effort is saying with the fewer staff that we have, how can we make sure that we have the right skill sets doing the right work? And not to jump ahead, but for example, with the high school front office, our high school front office staffing model has been in place for probably 20 years. And it's hard to believe that nothing has changed in the way we operate our schools in that 20 years. So based on the feedback, and so that was an outreach from the principals that came to actually us and said, can we do something different in certain areas? And that opened up a whole conversation around what are we doing and how can we operate our front offices to provide the support where needed. So we went into it with the expectation of, okay, let's see what the right positions are, and then let's see, can we do it in a cost neutral or even a cost savings way? So that was how we approached this.
Okay, so the positions, though, at the district office building, are those a part of the 21 million, or are they cost neutral, or are we adding, reconfiguring positions out of that 21 million reduction?
This, Mrs. Rooks, this is what we're proposing is resources that remain following the $21 million reduction.
Okay. I'll probably have more questions, comments at the end, so we can continue.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Mrs. Vistanair. Sorry to hijack your presentation. If you want to scroll back up and.
All right, everyone look away, I'm scrolling. I don't know, I was going to say no seizures shall be triggered during this presentation, at least not intentionally. Okay, the second position that we are requesting is really a reconfiguration from one position to another with additional resources coming from that overall bucket that we're reviewing. So currently we have one elementary maintenance supervisor overseeing the 33 elementary campuses. In comparison, we have one high school supervisor overseeing 7 high schools, which granted those campuses and those are very large and very complex. But the sheer number of schools makes it very difficult for one individual to address and make sure that we're working through work orders in a timely manner, that we're staffing, and when somebody calls out, given how thinly staffed we are on the campuses at this time, we wanted to make sure that we had the support we need for the campuses, because when the maintenance individual, for example, the day lead calls out on an elementary campus, that's the person who comes in and unlocks the front gate and starts turning on the lights and all of the things. And so when you don't have that person who calls out sick that day or maybe out for a week or something along those lines, having that extra support is really critical. So the request was to add an elementary school maintenance supervisor at this position. We are closing a central maintenance technician, energy management. It's a classified position, so there is that offset that we will need to do, and you can see the accounting at the end. Within our public relations department, we have the responsibility of responding or coordinating the responses to public records requests has been really fallen within their purview. As you can see, and I'm sorry the numbers are so tiny on the screen and even on the screen in front of me. So essentially, the number of public records requests has generally has increased exponentially. We are working very hard to make sure that we respond to those in a timely manner as required by law. So we definitely try to look through it. It is a considerable time constraint, especially when emails are requested, for instance, because you have to look through every email. You have to make sure student names are redacted, any personnel information you've got to redact. So we make sure that all happens. Right now, we've been doing the work with the assistance of an administrator on assignment. His position, an assignment ends on 6/30/26. So we would like to add a coordinator, so somebody who can focus on this full time. We know that this is an area that will continue to need support, and if we come to some point in the future where it's not as needed or we don't have as many requests, we can reevaluate the position. So we're looking to create a position, if it's classified hourly 16, for approximately, $43,000. And just for the numbers, I did use the base of all the positions, base pay of the positions, but when I use the individuals leaving, I use their actual salaries. So then you can see those differentials and pieces. So there may be some differences as we hire individuals with some experience. This is an area we believe we can train someone, so we can most likely bring them in at that lower end of the range. Next, I have the human resources structure change request. We thank you to the board for your support of developing and adding an investigator position. We are in the process of filling that position. Our first candidate withdrew, so we're moving forward. Should have an offer out today, and hopefully be filling that position. One of the pieces as we built out the request for that position was just the sheer number of investigation and employee relations situations that have come about. And so as much as it would be great to have a whole band of investigators, what we've have a long time lacked is really that higher level of support for the employee relations issues, because not every employee relations situation turns into an investigation, thankfully. And so, but we know that we have a large department, and so we had an individual that was our HR operations manager for a long time. She worked for the district for over 35 years. Her knowledge and her experience, made her a very unique individual. And when she left, as we've been working through the HR team and developing our best practices, we really need that additional mindset. That individual can come in and really support the higher level concerns and work through employee relations who's trained in that area. So but also has the ability to do investigations as needed. So those investigations that don't require, shutting down the office for a day or two to do all of that, but the things that can happen more quickly and handle for a few other people. We also want somebody who can help with quality hiring. I feel like the more we can focus on quality hires, that should end up resulting in a correlation of reduction in employee relations issues and as well as investigations. So really wanting to continue to grow and expand our expertise through the entire district in terms of making sure that we do really great quality hires. And I bring this forward as something as I looked at some of our surrounding districts. Deer Valley has someone dedicated to the classified staff. Scottsdale and Paradise Valley both have 2 directors in their area. So felt like it really kind of matched, and we're bigger than both of those districts. So just given our size, this has been one of those areas for challenge. So we requested that change. I also put in some additional requests that kind of, again, try to bring that alignment as we look at the requirements and the requests of the positions. And so we have an HR generalist who, for some reason, is still at exempt 5. The other generalists are exempt 6. But I asked to bring this individual higher, or this position higher, especially because of the focus on our systems. So HR relies on several software systems, and having somebody who is an expert and can be the administrator of those positions and supports IT and making sure those changes happen would be very helpful and critical. Our HR manager is currently an exempt 8. I'm asking to bring it to an exempt 9. This will bring that in line with some of our higher level manager positions in the district. Our manager position has really taken on the HR operations. So if you've ever been hired by our school district, you will the joys and all the 1,000 steps that goes into that. And so there's a lot of places where gaps can occur, and there's been more and more requirements over the years in terms of making sure that we have compliance in a lot of areas. You know, did we check this website? Did we background check this? All the things, as well as we also manage over 6,000 volunteers that have joined the district, and that falls within that area. So that support is there. Our benefits and compensation manager has currently been receiving a stipend for the additional work provided in the department. So this would be removing the stipend, but also bringing that the classification in line with the operations, the HR manager, which I call the operations manager. And so the work that this individual is doing has really been around the support of building out the letters of reasonable assurance, and as well as contracts that are not traditionally something that happens within the benefits department, but it's been a necessary support and need. So wanted to bring that in line. Finally, the HR specialist lead, she is currently classified as a 15. All of the specialists are 14, so we're looking for a little bit bigger of a gap between the lead and the frontline staff. And so for a minimal cost, it gives us a little bit more expansion and ability to bring that salary up. We do have an HR specialist position that we are closing with the operational efficiencies that we have been building in the department and the changes. I'm really pleased to see that. I mean, I've been getting more feedback about, okay, so I used to have a hard time getting a job posted. It's getting easier and better. So we want to continue along that line, but we know we can do that with one less specialist, and then so we can absorb that savings to help pay for these offsets. Moving on is a request from our CTE department. They are also looking for that reclassification of specialists. So as on the previous screen, you can see that our specialists in the HR department are grade 14. Their specialists have been classified as 13s. So this would be an additional cost for both of them of approximately $4,000, a little over $4,000. These positions are funded through West MEC IGA funds, and so this is something that they can build within the grant and help cover those costs. Okay, within Title IV, so the justifications on the next screen, but this is the creation of a wraparound services specialist. The job description would be in the board packet next week. This is funded through Title IV, which is for the Safe and Healthy Students Federal Grant. It is for $16.24 an hour, which is right around $33,000 a year. So it's and I think this position was also 12 months. So what this position is designed to do is really help us with the monitoring and support under the McKinney-Vento Act, as well as ASRS, or ARS. ASRS is the Arizona State Retirement Fund, so it's not that. So Arizona Revised Statutes 15-901. So we had been providing these supports for our students through the homeless and foster liaison, with additional support from the social workers, which is required under the federal funding. With the elimination of those positions, we need to have another level of support to meet the requirements of the grant, and so we wanted to, so that is the request for this position. The second position we are requesting is a 21st century grant coordinator. So this position is actually built into a couple of pieces, more stipends than actual positions. So we would be adding this to the additional duties chart. It is written into the grant for this next year, and really what we're looking for the support from this position to do is to make sure that they can help oversee all of the learning centers, the after-school programs, making sure that we're in compliance with the grants, and coordinating services for students. So it is very much a support position for the community members who take advantage of these services. And so it just adds an additional support, so then all the individuals who are working extras can have have some additional compensation for that work. Then we have this is the request for a McKinney-Vento and homeless program specialist. We'll probably shorten that title, but so it is also a classification hour level 10, so this is also approximately about $33,000 total. This will be paid out of the Title I funding, and so it really provides that administrative support for the Title I and specifically supporting the McKinney-Vento homeless education program. Currently, we have one individual, and he's doing an amazing job, but he's doing all of the work, and as you can imagine, supporting this work, this is an expanding need for the district, so having 2 people do the work still is probably greatly understaffing, but at the end of the day, this is the grant monies that we would like to use towards this position to help build out those resources. Next up, we have our eCampus and reclassification of our instructional design specialist. The individual in this position has been working as a classified grade 17, which starts at about $22.98 an hour. She has been instrumental in really making sure any new class that is created or offered, that all of the classes can work on the platform that we utilize for the campus. She's very much an expert in that program, but we also know to be competitive, and so I did some market research to go out there and say, like, okay, what are other organizations paying for this position? So we're at $22.98. That was about a $44,000 or $45,000 job. Really, it's looking to competitive pay is up in the $51,000 to $68,000. We're asking for an increase for $5,000. We believe that additional enrollment will help support this with the new campus and the new marketing that will be able to absorb those costs. Our high school support staff, I mentioned earlier, I kind of introduced this a little bit earlier. This really came about with a great conversation with our high school principals about what do you need? Because there were some questions like, well, I really, and as I talked to each campus, some campuses, well, I need more of this or I need less of this and all the things. And so we started to do a comprehensive look at the support staff within the high school setting and how it's working and whether or not we have the titles and the work that's needed. So this took place over several meetings, so the principals were very engaged, and I thank them for all their work because we did a little miniature, Fair Labor Standards Act study session about what makes the position exempt and not exempt, and so to answer those questions and really then figure it out, because as we looked at the titles and the work that's happening on the campus every day, there was a feeling that we really do need a new look at this. So the positions changes really, so the office manager was really meant to then also help remove some of the administrative burden from the administration so they can focus more on the educational activities of the campus. It elevates what we've traditionally called the school secretary, our principal secretary, to that level of, and it's funny because you really talk to any principal and they will tell you who really runs the school. And so we're going to give them credit for that work and that effort and say, yes, you are managing all of this. So they will have individuals in these areas that will report to them to help them make sure that they meet the exempt status and requirements. The other position that really became less, or changed being or efforts on the campus is the library parapro. High school students may check out books, but they're not doing it to the same level or opportunity. So really what our library pros on most campuses really have turned into is really that tech support with making sure that laptops get handed out and any concerns or support needed there. They also help with some testing. So the team, like the tech and operations specialist, with a reclassification, recognizing that the additional work that is going to need to be done because because, making sure every student has a functioning laptop and your staff has a functioning laptop is a really critical piece of the work. They wanted to add an assistant principal secretary. We have what is currently called an assistant principal secretary, but really what that individual ends up doing is supporting the athletics and the athletic director of the campus. And due to the needs and the work just within that area alone, monitoring, no pass, no plays, things along those lines, and communications, there was a feeling that the rest of the assistant principals were left to kind of manage on their own. And so this would give them that additional support with their areas of responsibilities, which can include special education, testing, all the operations on the campuses. In addition, they asked for a reclassification of the career specialist. Right now, it is a classification 9, reclassifying that to a higher classification. This position is one of those key positions that really works with the individual students to help them identify where they want to go to school, what are the opportunities, how to fill out applications, all of those things. Or if college isn't the next step, then what are those, like how to be ready, college and career ready, so that career ready. So given the responsibilities and the criticality of that job and really in student success, they asked for a reclassification of that position. Other changes are job titles. The bookstore manager, we had kind of a laugh because people who apply for the bookstore manager when it comes open thinks they're going to come and work in a bookstore. And they're like, there are no books. So this was really just a retitling of the name for clarification and then out there. And then our the current position that we call the assistant principal secretary would really move into the athletic secretary, and with also a reclassification to recognize the work that they do, because they really manage those campuses. Any usage, order, transportation. I mean, it's a heavy lift and a big job. We did not make changes to the guidance secretary, the attendance secretary, or attendance clerk. I do have a note there that we would look to maybe reduce the number of days for the attendance secretary. They're coming in 12 days before students get here, and we're trying to figure out what that was all about. So we'll correct that. And then a receptionist. There is in this kind of built in this is an office manager for the Peoria Pathways. They are going to keep the secretary for eCampus and secretary for PFA, Peoria Flex Academy, and so they'll have those 2 levels that are supporting those programs. This would then be that campus oversight and support for all things Peoria Pathways. So this would so by doing that, it actually creates 8 office managers as opposed to 7, which would have been the replacement of the school secretaries for the high schools. So we're asking to request this position. The timing, we talked about pushing this out a year, and the request of the principals was that felt it was too urgent to wait. So this will have some staffing impact. So we will be working. We notified staff yesterday that this is up for consideration, and that we would work through each individual situation on the campus to make sure that individuals who would like to move to new positions have that opportunity to do that. With the collapsing of some positions, obviously there's realignments of duties and job descriptions that need to be done, so we'll be working through all of that. We've started those job descriptions. Most of them are done. We just want to refine them, because obviously, when you get 7 individuals in a room, we're talking about, let me say that equivalent of like 20 or 35 jobs, that the 35 individuals who are doing that work will have some feedback about how, what we're recommending. And so we're giving ourselves some flexibility to address that and make sure that those can work. So the surprising part was that this actually did end up in an approximate savings for every campus, and that was really, good to hear, because I felt like, okay, we're adding positions, maybe and then the reclassifications, we were going to end up with too much cost that we wouldn't be able to move forward, but through the collapsing of the 3 positions, we're able to get there. So the additional cost of the Peoria Pathways is that $47,994. That is captured again in that math at the end, where you can kind of, I can go to the next slide. So anywhere where you saw on any of the slides that are M&O funded positions, because of all the movement throughout all of these pieces, that we've still built in some capacity and have a net savings. Worst case scenario, net neutral as we get into the individual offers and look at those positions, but I don't think that it's going to be more than $5,000 or $4,200 in that case. And part of that, I'll jump ahead, I'll go to the next slide. One of the things we're seeing is that, and it's not a bad thing, but it's also not really operationally sustainable in terms of several years ago, the district made the determination to eliminate the max pay range of positions, which on one hand is amazing, and I support that, and I'm all for people making more money. I think the challenge is, though, because then you have individuals who move from position to position and they keep jumping in terms of classifications. Now we have individuals that are paying very good wages for classifications that wouldn't necessarily justify that salary range. It wouldn't be something that we would land on if we were in the business world, and we are in the business world. So wanting to try to tamper that a little bit with these changes. So where we have reclassifications, making the recommendation that if the individual is making at least 150% of the starting pay of the higher classification, they would stay flat. And communicating that ahead of time and making sure everyone is aware of that, because I don't want people to be kind of aware and saying, well, what do you mean I'm not getting a pay raise? I'm going to be doing more work. Well, if they're at 150% of the pay range, they are compensated fairly well. Now, I'm not going to say all of our salary ranges are where we would like them to be, but I think if we keep increasing and creeping up the pay on those positions, it doesn't allow us to make some of those changes. So when we talk about situations where we have compression, this impacts us, because now if I have somebody at $27 and the pay rate is going to go up, if I give them the same percentage as somebody down low, that is a much big dollar amount, and that has an overall budgetary impact that I think is an unintended consequence for us. So this was one of the pieces we just wanted to make sure that we put out there and sought your feedback. So with that, I stand for questions.
Thank you, Mrs. Vicentainer. Mrs. Brooks, I know you're still on the phone with us, right? You want to go ahead first?
Yes, thank you. So I just, the only thing is that what's just kind of frustrating reading through this is this was given to us, I believe, yesterday at 5 o'clock, all this documentation, and ready for the meeting this morning at 8:30. So I just wish that this had been maybe given a couple days ago so that there was time to really dive deep and process. But for me, I have to look at student site level impact versus administrative growth. Like the thing that I see in this presentation is a lot of administrative district growth versus that site level positions that affect our students. I mean, I'm trying to remember that I believe we had already discussions a couple months ago regarding front office staff, moving them around. I think there was a presentation of creating some type of new program or position of student records, front office persons. So I don't know if that's where that's kind of coming from, is we're going backwards and going to that, but I don't know. I have a hard time with all of these positions asking for it, specifically when they're district level positions and we're making cuts at the site levels and asking the staff at the site levels to do more work. I don't know. I have a hard time with that when we have classroom staffing versus central staff administration. It still just feels kind of like that. So I'm having a hard time with this one. And the public records request position, if there's an influx of public records happening right now, I just don't see how we create a position when later on those requests could go down. It just seems like we're adding a lot of positions when we just did a reduction. This one's a hard one for me, all these positions. I would have liked to, I guess, get that feedback from the principals because sometimes it's hard to make decisions when you're hearing it from third party, right? It's better to hear it directly from those individuals at the site level so that there is that communication from the board to the principals. That's just kind of my thought process around this. I don't know. It just seems like there's a lot of consolidating high school positions to reduce costs, but there seems to be like an increase of support at the DAC and decreasing supports at the building. So that's just my kind of feedback from this presentation. I don't see a lot of adding supports to K through 8 schools on here. I don't know. I just would have liked to have seen more supports at the schools, and it just seems like we're adding more jobs at the district building. So I have a hard time with a lot of this information that was given to us. I mean, this was yesterday at 5 p.m. So, that's kind of my thought process around this presentation today.
President Tobey, Mrs. Rex, thank you for that feedback. And I apologize for the late posting of the positions. Today is not a voting, so what we really were trying to do is make sure we got as many positions in front of you, knowing that we would like to bring back the positions that you, and get your feedback today about next steps with the thought that an actual vote on any of these changes would take place on the June 9th board meeting. So this was the opportunity to get to in front of the public as well as for all of you to evaluate these positions. So we have the week ahead to work through all of that. In terms of the site level changes, we are continuing to provide support at the staff, and some of those changes I think were brought forward in prior meetings, which we can share with all of you.
Okay, no, I understand what you're saying, but again, from a perspective of as a board member, I know that it wouldn't be voted on today, but just getting it at 5 o'clock last night and having a meeting this morning at 8:30. These are big decisions to make that affect schools, students, staff, and then having a vote on it next week. Like, I don't know. This presentation seems like it's already a done deal, in my opinion. And so I'm having a hard time. And it's a lot of positions to be adding in. From a district level standpoint versus a site level standpoint. That's just my opinion. I think we need to be focusing more on site levels versus district level because it seems like we're consolidating a lot at the school level, but increasing at the top level. When I hear, and this is coming from a perspective as a parent, when I'm taking my kids to school and the workloads that the support staff, the teachers, the front office, the school nurses, all of the workloads that they have. And it's not anything attacking wise, but it's it's thinking prospectively the two different scenarios. And I'm hearing, well, we have now an influx of public records requests this month, so we need to add another job position to that because that's too much of a workload. I have a hard time with that because we're cutting positions at the school level and their workload is just as heavy. And we're asking them to do more work while cutting positions at the site level. I think of those two different scenarios. And that just really stands out to me.
Thank you. And with regard to oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I just know that there's been a history I've heard about a lot of school staff members are frustrated that there seems to be more district level positions than site level positions. And with regards to even filling the deputy superintendent of educational services position, I have questions around that because we haven't even dived deep into, if we choose a superintendent, what if that superintendent has a different thought process of changing things around, consolidating even more in that whole department area? That's what I would have liked to have seen, because if we're trying to do cost savings and we're trying to do what is best for kids, that starts with the ground up, the individuals on those campuses that support those students. And so I just don't understand filling all these positions in when we're at a time of searching for a superintendent and having to reduce costs and reducing our budget. I have a hard time with some of this.
Thank you, Mrs. Rooks. Just to clarify, there's not as many new positions as I think it looks. There's reclassifications of positions, so I can bring forward a net head count to provide that clarity. I apologize, I could have done that here. We were trying to do that. With regard to the public records request, we're bringing that forward. We're currently paying somebody almost $100,000 to do that work, and so we're looking to bring in somebody at almost just a little over half of that to can focus on that work. So it is yes, and if the position and if the work were to reduce and go away, then we can obviously make those changes. And going forward, we recognize going into the 2027 school year that we have an M&O it's not an override. We have a couple of propositions on the ballot. Okay, I'm going to work on my language. Propositions on the ballot that, if unsuccessful, then a lot of this work will go away. And the positions that are funded by grants are one-year positions at this point, unless the grant dollars would continue. So that would be something we would continue to monitor and adjust.
Okay. Again, my perspective is looking at our organizational chart, how many employees we have in each department, and adding more employees to those departments at the DAC level, at the organizational chart level. That's where I'm just kind of trying to find a balance with regards to the site levels. And so for perspective wise, and this is just as an outside kind of looking in, when we're talking about adding and moving around and doing different things in the HR department, I have reservations about that with regards to, we just moved our chief HR officer into an interim superintendent position, and then that is now being brought forward at this meeting for more positions in HR. Like, it just does not create a great perspective for me. This is the first thing that we're addressing is all these positions. That's just kind of where I'm sitting at right now with it.
President Toby, Mrs. Rooks, thank you for bringing that up, because actually, I believe the board received 2 emails this week talking about the support or the lack of support from the Human Resources Department. So this actual agenda item was brought forward, or those positions were brought forward in partial response to that, because I believe it's true. We have 4,000 employees, and if you follow the Society of Human Resources management recommendations, they recommend 1 human resource person per 100 employees. That would give us about 40 employees in human resources. That's not reasonable. I'm not asking for that. What I'm advocating for is to bring in that support for those individuals who are looking for it, because I do know the frustration of when you have a tough employee situation and you want someone to answer the phone. And for instance, our turnover at the director level for having 1 director has been about every 2 years. And so as soon as we get somebody on board, trained and ready to go, and they know the system, they know the schools, they leave us because it's not sustainable. We just lost directors Josh Snow. He's going to private organization. He's going to make significantly more money and work a lot less hours and have no direct reports. The hours he was putting in during this last year, were really significant and really caused some major burnout. And so, I respect your concern, and I don't bring it forward lightly. I've led enough HR departments to know that you've got to have the right amount of people doing the right work to provide the right support, and that is why I brought forward this recommendation.
Thank you, Mrs. Vicentiner. Mrs. Rooks, any follow-ups?
Nope, I think I made myself pretty clear that I think that there needs to be better support at the schools versus more positions at the district building. Thank you.
You're welcome. Mrs. Ewing, would you like to answer or ask questions?
Thank you, President Toby. So when I think about, when I was walk around with Dr. Summers at the different sites, he would continue to say, we need to provide a better product or a better service. And so many of these positions are that. The district office is always supposed to be a support office for our sites. So when we're looking at food services, we need to be able to provide a better service there, adding that additional food service person, which isn't a district level position. It's actually off at a different location. But that is to better support our schools. The maintenance, this board has over the last year or two continued to complain about how our schools need to look beautiful. The community needs to see that so that they understand where the investment of the money can go towards. And that is helping to provide better service at those site levels. The CTE, that's a site level position, right? They're not going to be here at the district office. That would be...
They are actually here, but they support the sites.
Okay, so they support the sites. Mm-hmm. The McKinney-Vento and the wraparound services, that is to support the students because we do have that motto of every student, every day. So we need to make sure that we're supporting all of our students. And we know that we have students in this district that have a lot of additional needs. Talking to Reese, I think it was like a year ago, he was talking about the increase in homelessness, and I think it's now quadrupled. So it's not even doubled or tripled, and so it's quadrupled. And we're only going to, with the lack of affordable housing and so forth, we're only going to see that number increase. And we've increased our Title I students too. So there needs to be individuals to help support those students. And then I am happy to see our high school support that we have reconfigured that. Because we also have a position that's going away. Chris Lopez Lira's position is going away. And so it seems like we're putting more load on our campuses, on our high school campuses. And so reconfiguring that and adding what they need at the high school and really being able to talk to those principals and say, help us to design a staffing structure that works best for you. I feel like we have done that. So, I know Ms. Rooks mentioned, did we look at anything as far as for our K through 8 and in terms of what types of support services they're looking at? And then I guess the only other thing is how will these positions help to really build our leaders? I know that that's another thing that we've constantly talked about. How do we build up our assistant principals to then build into our director level positions so that we're really growing our own leaders?
Thank you, President Toby, Mrs. Ewing. Thank you for that feedback. And it is all the support, and a lot of these positions are actually located out in supporting school programs. So we, as we want to grow, eCampus and as well as Peoria Flex Academy, having somebody who can, provide that day-to-day operational support was allowing Sybil, who is probably one of our best marketers out there, and getting the next things going. So we really, we try to be really strategic about all these positions. With regards to support for the K-8, Mrs. Burns Carrie is not in here right now, but there was work through the special education department to provide on-campus support and remove positions or reduce positions here at the DAC and get the support out to the campuses where they are needed. So those are pieces that we're trying to be very strategic about, and to that very point, saying we need people to be in the right places at the right time. And so having a bunch of people sitting at the district office is not the right place at the right time, but at the same time, you do need folks here when people call and they need help, that help is available.
So maybe at some point, like in a Friday report, maybe that would be helpful for us as a board, and then maybe in a meeting at some point, just to let the community know what are all of those supports that we have that are at the site levels, so that there is an understanding from the community how is that support at the site provided, and so forth. Because I think that's a big piece. Because I know that we as board member, we get emails or we talk to people in the community and they may have this complaint or that complaint, and we want to make sure that the community members know who they can go to on the site, who has the expertise to handle that issue and that problem and so forth. And so I think it would be helpful to, so it may seem from our perspective that is not being provided, where there might be actually somebody on campus and it's just the community doesn't understand who they can go to. And I don't know, maybe that's being built into Ms. Turner's position that she took, but maybe being able to better understand that would be helpful in the future.
Thank you. Yes.
Mrs. Bowles, go ahead.
Of all the positions that we've been presented today, I do have to say, 5 o'clock last night, I'm not whining, but it is very inconvenient when we get stuff that late at night. That is big in our district and the other things that we're facing. So, yeah, if it were me, I would have probably pushed this off for another time or another even study session, because it was not enough time for me. And to research some of this stuff, and it is a big deal. I understand we're not voting, but what we decide today is going to be the presentation that's coming back to vote on. And it does appear like we are creating more positions at a higher admin level than at the district, but I don't know if we are or not. So I'm going to ask, do you know what positions are creating an additional deficit into the 21 million?
President Toby, Mrs. Bowles, all of this together is providing additional, although not huge, but $4,200 savings.
I have that same thing up on my computer, so I thought that's what you said. And then, so how many of the positions you presented today are oversight positions, district level, DAC employed positions?
In terms of new positions, there's the maintenance position is new.
Well, reallocating or new. Really, it's not, I'm not asking about the money. I'm asking about, are they district level, meaning oversight, director positions? Those are the ones I want to know if there's, how many of those there are, and the.
Yeah, I apologize. I did not do a net on that, but just going through it. So the food service assistant director is just a reclassification of the same position, so that's not a new position. The maintenance position is a reclassification or creation of a new position and a collapsing of an old position. So it's a net zero head count. It's additional salary, but additional oversight for the schools for the support of the maintenance.
Right. So my question is, again, not about the money. It's how many positions are we reallocating or creating, both, into a position of a director position, meaning a DAC employee is what I would think of when I say that, versus a site level support.
I believe there's one.
There's
just one.
One position with all the positions that you created, or reallocated, or however that worked out, because I do understand that very much so at this time of the year. And I do appreciate that. I probably should have started with that. So you're telling me there's only one director position that we've reallocated or created, aside from the money, we've only created one district level position.
Unless I'm miscounting, yes.
And so that's including the ones that we reallocated.
Yes.
Or maybe I should say it this way. How many site level positions are in there?
You have the McKinney-Vento will be at, and the eCampus will be at a site. You have the wraparound services will be out in the community. The 21st Century Coordinator will be out in the community.
When you say out in the community, is that on a site level?
Yeah, site
Meaning,
levels.
are they housed on site level?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we don't, yes, we're, the only position, and all of the high school support positions will be at the sites. And so, oh, and I apologize, Mrs. Rooks brought this up, and I wanted just to address it on the high school. We had, I believe, an earlier presentation in the year, we had talked about creating centralized registration. We had stepped away from that, and so this is not bringing that matter back. This is still keeping the registration where it belongs at the, or no, I shouldn't say where it belongs, but where it currently is. Sorry, scooch over from Mrs. Stay out of reach. So it's just fine where it's at, but it could go somewhere else too. Support staff position. So it was so keeping currently right now that role is on the campus, and this was more again. And I can be happy to bring for have the high school principals provide information and feedback because they really were driving this.
Well, and I'm going to say it because it's the elephant in the room. When we are facing possible lawsuits and things that have been in the news, and possibly the newest one being up to 20, probably more than that, but 20 that we know of, civil or criminal lawsuits. That's what the public is hearing. I mean, that's to me that's a no-brainer. We still have to go on. I know that we still have to plan, so I can appreciate that. I don't know if the timing of this was the best, but at a time when we should be gathering documents for a search warrant, we're in the boardroom planning the next school year. And again, we should be planning. That's what businesses do. You go on. But I think we need to be sensitive to what's happening in our community. And really, if we're not, we really have no skin in the game, nothing to complain about if families don't want to come into our schools. Because this screams, you know what, we're going to put that aside. It's not really that important right now. Now, I know that's not what we're doing, but that is what they see. So, but I'm not even going to pretend like I know how much work went into that. I know that this is the time of the year. Typically, from what I remember, it's a little farther down, like into the summer, that we reallocate these positions, or even maybe closer to the beginning of May. So, again, at a time that we're asking for an M&O and more money and possible lawsuits and everything that's around us, and it looks like we're going to ask for more money. I know that's obviously not what it is. You've already said the $4,100, and that's amazing to me. It's just the timing. I just want to be sensitive to that. I have a couple of questions. Well, first, one comment. I, too, do not think that we need to hire someone for public records. That's never, if we can stay out of the news, that might even dwindle down to a little, much, much less. Meaning, I'm not saying the things in the news aren't huge. They should be in the news. But again, that's the elephant in the room. If we create a position around that, I don't see the need for that. The HR position, the specialist position that you mentioned that we're going away from, is that the HR specialist position that we just, as a board, voted on to put in place?
President Toby, Mrs. Bowles, no. No, this is a position that was already in place.
So what is the HR position, the title of that position that we just voted on a few board
Who
meetings
is an
ago?
HR Title IX investigator?
No. There was an assistant to HR not linked to Title IX.
No, I'm sorry,
All right,
Mrs. Bowles. I
I'll have
don't
to
have
back.
any other position that we requested.
Okay, so that was a Title IX position only.
No, it's a HR Title IX. It's a combination of human resources and Title IX. So it's a investigative support for any type of matters that would rise to the level of a full-blown investigation. That could include Title IX, which includes staff.
And so in the past, we had volunteers doing that?
President Toby, Mrs. Bowles, you had a director and a chief of personnel doing it, along with a Jim Nelson, our Title IX coordinator, as well as some principals throughout the district that were asked to do training and support it. So, and from time to time, an attorney support. So it has been, the number of investigations have increased. The ability to do that and then still operate a department has taken its toll, and also impacted ability for folks to get a hold of us when they need to. So this is really that, looking for that opportunity to say, you have somebody you can outreach to.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. One more question, Title IV, the wraparound, how is that going to be funded?
Title IV is a grant, and so there's funding that specifically comes in for that grant. I'm looking at our Director of Federal Funding, so making sure that she's giving me the nod of the head. It's a grant.
Okay, that's all I have, thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Profit.
So I have a very different take on this presentation. You know, our first topic we talked about, we need to right-size the district to not just meet the needs currently, but to be meeting the future. I feel like this is what we're doing here. I think Mrs. Rooks might have misunderstood perhaps, because we had talked about not taking those front office people out of the office. And so and correct me if I'm wrong, but all this is reclassifying them to more aptly describe the jobs that they're already doing. So for instance, I have lots of kids in athletics, and around this time of year, the poor front office manager is overcome with register my athlete requests, and it is like bonkers. You have to wait in a long line, and it's all very difficult. So really honing in on what we want that specific person's job to be will make that process so much easier to ensure that we're having fidelity in the athletics program, not just with register my athlete, but leading on to no pass, no play, and all the things that come with that. So for me, I don't see us taking anyone out of site level positions. We're just reclassifying them, particularly in the front office, to meet the needs that are currently happening within the district. So apart from that maintenance position, I'm not seeing anyone being removed from a site. I was so happy to see McKinney-Vento. That presentation, I think Melissa alluded to it probably maybe 6 months ago. And with the explosion of that population of unhoused students, that has been a presentation that has kept me up at night of how are we meeting the needs of those students. And at that time, it was over 300 students, that one person. Yeah. I mean, just think about that. 300 unhoused students that one human being was supposed to be helping. So that absolutely, I'm very happy to see that we're able to provide that additional service. And again, I'm just grateful for the outside the box thinking, for ensuring that our titles actually reflect what the people are actually doing and what the needs currently are, because that puts us in a position, if we do have turnover from here till forever, it's just easier to hire and move the organization forward. So I really just see this as, again, right-sizing and reclassifying those positions. And the great news is there is some marginal savings with it. And so I really appreciate this. Again, I just want to reiterate to everyone listening, there is no reduction on site staff. So I'm not sure. And certainly if there was, that would be a massive red flag for me. But being that is not the case, so thank you for being willing to look at these positions, work within what we have, and then get the biggest bang for our buck with the jobs that are currently being done.
Thank you. President Tomey, Mrs. Prophet, just so to be clear, we are reducing the assist secretary and library parapro. So there's 3 positions and we're adding 2, but they're higher classifications. So there is a net -1 from a head count, but higher classifications and more responsibility for a recognition of the responsibility of the work they're doing. So I do want to be clear there. So, and that was also recognized by the principals and still recommended and moved forward.
Great, thank you. And when you talk about because I know exactly what position you're talking about within the libraries, because again, it's not a librarian typical scanning books in and out type of situation. And so the reclassification of that seems like an absolute great move for, again, what's actually happening on the campuses. I think that there was one other thing that I'll let Jeff go because I can't remember.
President Toby, if I may.
Go
Can you
ahead.
state again how many we are taking off campus? Did you say 1.5 or did you say that? You just said to Ms. Profit, to clarify, we are actually removing 1 position off the site level?
President Toby, Mrs. Bowles, yes. So as you look through the principal secretary is a switch, so that's a 1-to-1 head count. The assist secretary and the library parapro, so that's a 2-to-1. So there is a reduction there of 1 head count. The record secretary responsibilities will be picked up by the assistant principal secretary, so that's a 1-to-1. So between the assist and the library parapro, that is where you would see a reduction of 1 person.
On every site?
On every site.
Okay, thank you.
At high schools. Sorry, high schools only. This is high school only.
Well, thank you, Mrs. Vistatainer, for this. I do think that this represents consolidation, aligning, trying to trim down or slimming down as a district. And as Mrs. Profit said, a lot of these positions are already doing the more advanced work and the more heavier workload. And I think I heard you say that this was you approaching the sites, asking what they needed. And this was as a result of compiling all their responses. Is that correct?
President Toby, yes. So actually, this was a lot of committee work. So you can imagine getting 7 high school principals in the room and reaching consensus. So it was a lot of great work, a lot of great discussion, a lot of in between work. So I appreciate all of their effort. They really drove for this change.
Yeah, and the only ones that I see as far as here at the DAC is that HR and the public records specialists. And I know that you can't do chief personnel officer and interim at the same time. Like, we have to fill that spot. Josh Snow, we have to fill his position and provide that leadership. And I agree, when our sites call and need questions answered or they have a personnel issue, we should be answering the phone. And so I see this as even though it's here in the district, it's actually supporting the sites because it's a resource to every site to provide that timely information that's accurate, which will, as you said, hopefully streamline our processes, but also make us more efficient. And then public records request, I think you had a slide on there talking about the last few years, and every year it's been increasing. The burden has been increasing. So it does seem that public record position is actually going to be an ultimate cost savings, even though we are hiring one specifically for the communications office. So we'll probably get a final count as 2026 next month, I would imagine, but it's been increasing, I would imagine, even before 2024. It's been increasing every year, so I do see the need there.
Thank you. And just if I may, to also, the one thing that I would like to point out, with the additional support of the administrator on duty who's been supporting us in this work, is you can see the number of days dropped from 47 to 12. And that is because you have a dedicated individual who can do that. When we don't have a dedicated individual, it then becomes, and I'll speak personally, and even speaking for Danielle, every public records that goes out, all the work happens ahead of time, and then we do a final review. So it's like in addition to work, and for all of us. And so having somebody that we feel that we can trust is going to really ensure that all that work is done, all the redactions that are necessary are done, really can help then streamline our oversight to make sure then that it's, and well, in hopefully my predecessor's oversight and support, to make it more streamlined, because there are times that even now, just because of sheer volume, that when we do another review of it, we find things like, oh, here's a social security number on this page or something like that. And so we want to make sure nothing gets shared that shouldn't get shared.
Right, and I do remember, just as when I was just a dad, right, in the district, and I did my own public records request, waiting 60 days was frustrating, and I think Mrs. Airy heard several of my frustrations even before I was a candidate, but I think 12 days is a very professional, and it's a good customer-oriented service that we're providing. Did you want to say something, Mrs. Airy?
President Toby.
I accept your apology at a time.
Thank you, and thank you for your patience, which is how we're starting most responses to public records requests now. Thank you for your patience. We had 92 public records requests currently open in the queue, but 5 more actually came in just this morning since the time you called to order. So we are up to 97 open public records requests, so that 12 days may be slightly increased from May 1st, but this is compliance with the law. This is something we are required to do, is to provide access to public records. It's also the right thing to do for transparency, to provide access to public records, and it is quite a laborious role, can sometimes be very monotonous for someone in this role, and currently it is shared by a number of people. It will still, with a volume of 97, have to be somewhat shared work, but having someone dedicated and doing that on a day-to-day basis, as we have had over the past, almost the majority of the past year, will be quite helpful. Thank you.
And to follow up on that, do we have an estimated cost as to what it costs us as a district to produce these records for the community?
President Toby, the system that we use, Just FOIA, allows us to track that. Certainly, without having someone dedicated to the role, we have not been manually entering that. If the board would like for us to do that, we could certainly begin to do that and make sure everybody who is in that system and that processes requests, pulls, and redacts, that they begin to do that, if that's something that you'd like to have us do going forward.
Okay. Yeah, we can definitely talk about that another time, but does anybody have any go-backs or follow-ups?
I just wanted to kind of highlight something Mrs. Bowles said about we can't ignore, that we've been in the news. And for me, this position that we're talking about addresses some of the accusations that have been brought forward about not being expeditious enough with this. You can only do what you can do with the people you have. And again, people don't understand that education law is real airtight. FERPA is airtight. There are things, this is a multi-step process in order to protect not just keeping the law, but protecting our students, protecting our employees, and ensuring that it's done with fidelity. And so I appreciate that, for me, as I'm out in my community talking about this, I'm grateful to be able to bring forward this discussion of how the district is responding to the need that they're seeing, that clearly the community is seeing as well.
Okay. Well, thank you for that presentation. Do you have anything to close out, Mrs. Vicentainer?
No, other than thank you very much for the opportunity to review these positions. They came from, as you can see, multiple departments and multiple areas of the organization, just reaching out for help and looking for that support as we try to make sure next year is the most very successful year for us.
No, and thank you. And just for my board members, this obviously is study session, is so that way we have this information so we can kind of sit with it and digest it over the next week before it does come before the board. I think that if there's any comments or concerns that you guys would like to follow up, I would just suggest, emailing or calling Mrs. Vicentainer between now and next Tuesday. But I think a week is a good amount of time for us to kind of sit with this and to evaluate each perspective, so.
And President Toby, we will also make available all the job descriptions, and because we do have a job description created for, I believe, all of the positions. So we will get if we don't, we'll fine tune any of the remaining and have those available as well.
Yeah, that'd be great. So we can sit with it over the weekend?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay,
President Toby, if I may.
go ahead.
Is it possible to table the last item because we were supposed to end at 11:30?
So I would have to ask Mrs. Susan how quickly she can get through some of
I
that.
was just going to say she's not here, but she is back there. She is here. I don't think it's going to take 20 minutes. I'll just straight say that, but.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think this is the time, and I understand that we ran a little bit long, but I do think it's an important topic for us to cover. Do you need a 5-minute break, or do you want to go through? Okay, moving on to 3.3, Board Ethics, Open Meeting Laws, and Confidentiality. Mrs. Siegel.
Thank you, Mr. Toby. Azure, can you put up the PowerPoint on the open meeting law? And then we'll do the confidentiality.
We will have our assistant, Mr. Terry, take care of that for us.
Thank you. Let me turn this off.
Open meeting law? Yep.
Open meeting law, I'm sorry. I'm trying to do two things at once. That's dangerous. I'll just do this very quickly and ask that everyone read this and then direct any questions through the board president to me if you have questions. Let me kind of turn halfway over here. The members of the board, let's go to the first slide. The basics are that this applies to all public bodies, board-appointed committees. It requires public officers to take legal action or discussion only at a duly noticed meeting, and the requirements regarding the posting agenda will be discussed, as well as keeping minutes. Next. These are the potential landmines that I see most often, not with your board singularly, it's all around Arizona in the school districts that our law firm represents. First of all, board reports, and I'll touch upon those. Secondly, executive sessions, going astray during executive sessions. Third is calls to the public. I think you know some of the concerns we've had on time, place, and manner. We've had some long calls to the public, and a good president regulates that. I have not seen that regulation be a problem, and I think you've done it quite well. Fourth is discussions about employees without notifying them. You know, when you're in executive session, sometimes you could be inclined to start discussing other employees because it's related, and your board is very good about self-regulating that. And finally, instructing the attorney, that needs to be in the meeting. I'll be talking about that. Some of these slides, because of the compressed time, I'm going to go over somewhat quickly. All right, let's go on. Important definitions. Legal action includes discussions. A lot of people, particularly new to public body service, think that we're only talking about when you take a vote or indicate your willingness to vote on a position or how you're going to vote. No, that's wrong. Even discussing an item is included in legal action. A meeting is a gathering in person or through technological means. There was an opinion written by the Arizona Attorney General in 2004. Seems like just yesterday because we're still citing it, about use of emails in connection with the open meeting law. I'll be going over this quickly, but I'll tell you right now, just real quickly, one-way communication. For example, say a board member goes to a conference and learns something new and wants to share it with the board, that's okay. But once the board, one board member responds, that's still okay because you're a 5-member board. But it's getting into what I would call danger zone. And that is that when you have a quorum that's registering how they feel about something, it gets to be an open meeting law violation, or it gets to be a meeting. Again, definition of a legal action means a majority of the members of the public body. The Attorney General's office has explained this many times. Now, you may ask, what if the superintendent meets with 2 board members and then meets with another 2 and then meets with 1 on the same topic? That's okay. The concern, though, is that some of those board members will share their opinion, or the superintendent would say, well, I talked to another board member and this is how they're going to vote. So you have to be very careful that it's a one-way communication. And the board members that you meet with that are less than a quorum, they can ask questions. At one point in time, the Attorney General's office took what I thought was too conservative of a position, and my partner, Jennifer McLennan, on behalf of Paradise Valley School District and Scottsdale School District, asked for a clarification, and the Attorney General said the 2 by 2 by 1 method is okay. That happens most often when a budget is discussed ahead of time. Budgets are tough areas, and sometimes new board members have no clue about what maintenance and operations versus capital is, and in that regard, a lot of times school districts and assistant superintendents or deputy superintendents have meetings with less than a quorum to explain what's entailed in a budget ahead of time, to shorten the meetings and give background information, and that's okay. We've already gone over this. I will tell you on the, back to the other, on the email open meeting law violations, you should not propose legal action. That's an exception. So if a board member says, I think we need to have a stop sign at the intersection of something near your school or a crosswalk, I think we need to vote to have a stop sign. That is proposing legal action, and you should not do that. Open call to the public. Just remember time, place, and manner. I have, not your school district, but other school districts that have a hard time listening to things that are critical or comments that are critical, topics that are critical of them or somebody else that they like. I'm sorry, you just have to tough it out and gut it out, and you can only respond to personal attacks at the end of the comment. It is, again, a bitter pill to take. It's hard to stay there, stay quiet, and kind of sit on your hands, but that's what the law is. So the open call to the public can also be regulated. Generally, school districts allow 30 minutes. Governing boards allow 30 minutes and 3 minutes a speaker. But if you have a room full of people, which is not unheard of in many districts, including Peoria Unified, then you can regulate how much time people have to talk. They may have, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, or 1 minute. 1 minute's a little tough to get everything in that period of time. But I've been surprised at some of these board meetings that speakers can make their point. A member of the public body shall not try to circumvent the open meeting law. I have not seen that recently. I have not seen that, certainly not in this district, where you direct an individual to try to violate the open meeting law by going through them rather than communicating according to the law. So you can't use a vehicle. It used to be called the hub and spoke method, or the daisy chain, where you have somebody there that's communicating to everybody and back and forth. Those were the problems we saw in the 1980s when I first started practicing law. Those were the problems that were addressed by then Attorney General Corbin, but I don't see that. People are pretty well educated by now. Okay, reports about current events. It allows the public body's officers to make a report about current events. You members of the board can make a report about current events, but you should refrain from anything other than that. You should refrain from taking a position on something that will come before the board. You should refrain from using it to get around just generally posting it and saying, I want this on the agenda. So an example would be, I attended the choir concert at this high school, and it was really nice, and I enjoyed it. A bad example would be, I just want to make a statement about closing our schools. I think that's a terrible idea, blah, blah, blah. I don't mean blah, blah, blah because it's not worthwhile, but it needs to be posted and so that the public knows about it. In your head, you should have this question go through. Is this something that if I were a member of the public, I'd want to know about and show up to register my support and watch what was happening? Adds a definition to executive session, limits who may attend executive session. Again, back in the 1980s, right after the law was pretty much substantively changed for the first time, used to have, especially school districts, where they brought in the whole cabinet. Now, no offense to the cabinet, but they may not be necessary to what's being discussed. And so now it's very clear in the statute that you can only have those people that are necessary to the meeting. These are the instances when you would discuss matters in executive session. Of course, the three most often are personnel matters, legal advice, or to instruct an attorney. You'll see that those are listed specifically. And by the way, in the agenda, you will notice that the agenda for Peoria and other districts have to specifically address what the topic is. You just can't refer to the statute. You have to say, to get legal advice on purchasing a new school site, to get legal advice on whether to sell a school site, to get legal advice on confidential records. Those are specifically the topics that I'm going to be talking about, or your attorney, whoever he or she is going to be talking about. That's exactly what I talked about, so we can go on. Permits release of executive session information to enforcers. Now, this is an exception, and it's important to note. It falls in 38-431-03, and it says when the only people that can have access to executive session minutes are the county attorney or the attorney general when they're investigating violations of the open meeting law. Again, it says when they're investigating alleged violations of the open meeting law, they can ask for documents. And in fact, many school districts have received letters from the Attorney General where they've asked for executive session minutes. In addition, this particular law says it does not waive attorney-client privilege. But it only applies, again, to an investigation concerning the open meeting law. Expands the scope of enforcement and increase the penalty to $500 per violation. So if a board member, for example, violates in one executive session several of the provisions of the open meeting law, that's $500 for each violation. If a board member violates more than one matter of the open meeting law in an open meeting, in the public meeting, that's also $500 per event, per violation. And of course, the Attorney General will give, it depends on the facts, often give the governing body or the person an opportunity to be re-educated on this, receive training, and that's in fact part of the reason we're having this training today. Not because you've been violated today, not that you've done any violation, I'm sorry, but it's training just so we can keep up with it and keep current with the law. Do I have any questions? I can turn around.
Board members, any questions?
I have a question, Susan. You had said that executive session clients attorney privilege, I heard that, and you had said that that applies, and that the minutes or the conversation cannot be recorded or documented and open to public records requests, correct?
Mr. Tobey, Mrs. Bowles, yes.
So how is it that Scottsdale is having to record their minutes, their executive session minutes? What exception is there to that rule?
I don't know that Scottsdale is. I know that they do a different method of taking executive session minutes. They, at least when our law firm represents them, but I'm not the one that is the client representative in our firm. But I do know when I was representing them, they tape recorded minutes. And so when there's been an investigation of the open meeting law violations, we provided that. But unless it's an investigation concerning open meeting law violations, that's not provided.
So then, in the current situation with the search warrant or any other situation that we have a search warrant, what I'm hearing you say is unless it was an open meeting law violation, they don't have access to that?
Mr. Tobey, members of the board, we have been researching that very issue, and no, they don't unless there's a specific, the court specifically addresses it. The reason is, and I'll go into confidentiality, is the Supreme Court of the United States and other courts have held that the attorney-client privilege is superior among all the privileges. And if you waive that, or if there's something that would waive it, and it can be inadvertently waived, that is, could be, have severe adverse circumstances.
That, I understand that as far as confidentiality. So I have been told as a board member, I don't even remember who, just as we're going through this whole process, that the only way that some records, and one of them being executive session, can be released is by a subpoena or a search warrant.
Mr. Tobey, members of the board, you can, it's the same thing I discussed to you. If there's a request from the county attorney or the attorney general for a violation of it, then attorney-client privilege information in executive session or other executive session minutes can be released. Thus far, the search warrant, if you're talking about the search warrant that is public, that was recently served, it is not a search warrant. It is not defined that it's about a violation of the open meeting law.
So then, because it does not define the violation of open meeting law, then we are not obligated to give those minutes?
Members of the, Mr. Tobey, members of the board, some of this goes into legal advice that I'm not comfortable giving at this point, but I've been working with the Peoria Police on reaching a common ground on this issue, and I'll give you an example. The search warrant asks for executive session minutes. I'm looking to Asher. She's probably more acclimated and knowledgeable about this. Asked for minutes from August of 2025 to May of 2026. If you recall, you had several executive sessions that had nothing to do with any sexual abuse or child abuse. You had executive sessions. If you, this is all information that deals with the agenda, and I'm not disclosing anything that isn't public. But you had it, for example, an executive session about property and whether you sell certain property, if you recall. So we were working to narrow that to what they're looking for, and then we'll iron it out, whether it's in front of a court or whether we work it out with the Peoria Police. We want the statement that we have made to the Peoria Police, my law firm dealing with the Peoria Police, at the direction thus far of Mr. Tobey, but I think previous direction is we want you to have the records you need, but we have to provide and comply with the law. And so if you talk to Azure, if you talk to your interim superintendent, if you talk to Danielle, they're working like heck, to get all this stuff done. There's volumes of documents. And thus far, we're producing them on a rolling basis, and many records have already been produced and will continue to be produced. But if you saw, it was served on Thursday last week, and it's due on Friday this week. And it involved, you're on a 4-day week. So the time period is very compressed and compact. And we're trying to, there's other privileges that apply to that, which I'll get into in the next presentation. But if you look at that, you've got many, and I don't want to jump ahead, but many of those documents have student names. And you have FERPA, and I know you as an educator understand that. The rest of the board understands that. And we're working with the Peoria Police on that one.
Okay, thank you. I just have a comment or a question. So if it's only dealing with open meeting law and executive session, I do understand that side of it. But one of the bottom of the search warrant, it says, such public offense being duty to report abuse, 13-3620A, which occurred on, and then the dates you have already alluded to the county of Maricopa, Arizona. Does that then supersede the open meeting law that we just talked about?
Mr. Tobey, members of the board, Mrs. Bowles, no.
Okay, that's all I have. Thanks.
This might be a good transition if you want to move forward to the next presentation for the sake of time, and we can conclude with questions. Mrs. Rooks, are you able to hold that thought until we can get, it seems like it's naturally progressing into the next presentation.
I guess. I just had a question on the attorney-client privilege thing, but I can hold it to the end, I guess.
Okay. This is other confidential, other information confidential by law. You'll see, I'm going to start talking about FERPA. Every school board member and every educator and parents should know about FERPA. It's Family Educational Records Privacy Act. It applies, it gives the parents the right to, and the student over 18 the right to say whether records can be released. Under FERPA, there's several exceptions. I know where you're going, so if I can be so presumptuous, it says you can release it to comply with a judicial order or lawfully issued subpoena. And to the next page, please. It says, and I believe I sent this to you, Mrs. Rooks, yesterday in response to a question. This quote is right out of a FERPA published advisory by the U.S. government. The FERPA protects the confidentiality of student education records. It applies to any public or private elementary, secondary, or post-secondary school, any state or local education agency that receives federal funds under a program administered by the Secretary of Education. So some of the records that are requested include student names. And whether or not, and if you recall, if you've read the police report, you will see that the names of minors have been redacted throughout the 200 pages. In our case, we are working with the Peoria Police about the redaction of names of students before we produce those names. That doesn't mean that the school district will not produce other documents, but the school district wants clarification on what it can and can't do with respect to those documents with student names. The next one goes to attorney-client legal advice. This is a statute. you see that this applies to criminal and civil matters, and you'll see I've cited these cases in Arizona. There's a United States Supreme Court case that, and subsequent cases that talk about the priority and hierarchy of this privilege as being the foundation of a client's ability to consult with his or her attorney. And I'm not going to read you what's there, but you can see the quote about that shows you the priority the courts give to attorney-client advice. Is that the end of the slides? There's only one other matter that I will talk to you about, and that's Title IX investigations. Title IX investigations are confidential unless you have a court order. Among the items requested in the search warrant include the Title IX investigation was done. We are preparing that Title IX investigation to provide to the Peoria Police. However, again, as I said, we are ironing out how to comply with it and still comply with FERPA. I think that covers my confidentiality presentation. There's certain items that I will be discussing with you in executive session on June 9th, 8th, what, 9th? Thank you. It's hard to believe it's June 2nd already. So if you have any questions, I'm here.
Thank you, Mrs. Siegel. Mrs. Rooks, I know you had a question. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Ms. Siegel, with regards to the attorney-client privilege section, I guess, is it, because there's 5 board members, right, and that's the client as a whole, is there a chance of, let's say, some type of case comes forward and can the board vote to release that attorney-client privilege? I don't know if does that make sense, the question I'm asking?
It does. The board as a body, no one person can, I'm sorry, Mr. Tobey, members of the board, Mrs. Rooks, no one person on the board can waive the attorney-client privilege. And if you're going to waive attorney-client privilege, it needs to be by a majority vote of the board. I would tell you, you have to consider this on a case-by-case basis. For example, there may be out there civil litigation pending, or that is in the forefront, or it's already happened, or it's been threatened through a notice of claim. You may want to consider what attorney-client advice on a case-by-case basis. I will give the rest of my advice in executive session on the 9th of June.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Ewing, any comments or questions on this presentation?
I don't, thank you. Thank you for all of the detail on this, thank you.
Mrs. Bowles, any follow-up?
Just a really quick clarification. So I think it was last week, there was, I don't even know what the event was, administrator celebration something, and we had 3 of the board members at that district event. Would that be considered breaking open meeting law?
Mr. Tobey, members of the board, probably not. If you've noticed, you have a lot of times where a quorum of your board is present at a Chamber of Commerce event or some sort of, well, even graduation. And you usually, it's not required by the law, but you usually do what we call courtesy notices that says on June 2nd, a quorum of the members of the board will be at a student graduation together. They will not discuss district business. Unless you have, and then there's a specific statute that covers it in an attorney general opinion on it. So unless you have evidence that while at that event, they talked about an item that would come before the board, not just a recipe for pound cake, you know, you would, I don't know, I don't cook. or bake. But it has to be something that would come before the board. So the Attorney General, at one point in time, the Attorney General had to address the situation. For example, when one of a board member, one of a town council, I believe, or maybe it was board, no, it was a school board, spoke at an event, and there was a quorum present. And the Attorney General said, just because one board member is there giving a speech and there's a quorum, doesn't mean there's a violation. After that opinion, the Arizona legislature enacted ARS section 38431.09 that codifies that. And in fact, in one situation, we received an open meeting law complaint that 3 of your board members were at a candidate forum. And the Attorney General found that to be no violation of the Peoria school board members.
Okay, so you're speaking more to the 3 being at an event and not discussing things that we would be discussing in the boardroom. Would any violation happen if the quorum was not posted?
No, Mr. Tobey, members of the board, Mrs. Bowles, there is no requirement in statute that says that you have to post this courtesy posting. It is what I just said it was, a courtesy posting.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Ms. Proudfit, nothing? Thank you, Mrs. Siegel. I believe that was 25 minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Good job. And just for edification, the other attachments, we do have policy 1-102, the role of the board, as well as 1-102.01A, the role of the board, which is the board member ethics for your review. But I don't have anything. Thank you for the presentation. Moving on to section 4, adjournment 4.1. Just need a motion to adjourn.
I'll motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Mrs. Cuthbert, we have a motion to adjourn by Mrs. Bowles and a second by Mrs. Proudfit.
Mrs. Rooks, are you still with us to cast your vote?
Yes, I am still here.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Mrs. Ewing?
Yes.
Mrs. Proudfit?
Yes.
Ms. Bowles?
Yes.
President Tobey?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, motion passes. 5 days. We are adjourned at 12:08 p.m. Thank you, everybody, for attending the study session.